Chapter 28. Signs of the End Times. Torches, rolling grapes, neckbeards. Meg gets cleaned up nice. The blast doors were a nice touch. I'd found my way back to the throne room level with no problem. The elevators cooperated. The halls were eerily quiet. This time no one greeted me in the antechamber. Where the ornamental golden doors had stood before, the entrance to Nero's inner sanctum was now sealed by massive panels of titanium and imperial gold. Hephaestus would have salivated at the sight. So much beautiful metalwork, inscribed with sorcerous charms of protection worthy of Hecate, all to keep one slimy emperor safe in his panic room. Finding no doorbell, I rapped my knuckles on the titanium. Shave and a haircut. No one gave the proper response because barbarians. Instead, at the upper left-hand corner of the wall, a security camera light blinked from red to green. Good. Nero's voice crackled from a speaker in the ceiling. You're alone. Smart boy. I could have got offended by his boy comment, but there was so much else to feel offended by that I figured I'd better pace myself. The doors rumbled, parting just enough for me to squeeze through. They closed behind me. I scanned the room for Meg. She was nowhere in sight, which made me want to smack a Nero. The room was mostly unchanged. At the foot of Nero's dais, the Persian rugs had been replaced to get rid of those annoying bloodstains from Lugaselwa's double amputation. The servants had been cleared out. Forming a semicircle behind Nero's throne were a dozen Germani, some looking like they'd served as a target practice for Camp Half-Blood's field trip. Where Lou and Gunter had stood before, at the Emperor's right hand, a new Germanus had taken their place. He had a stark white beard, a deep vertical scar on the side of his face, and armour stitched from shaggy pelts that would have won him no friends in the animal rights community. Rows of imperial gold bars had been lowered all over the windows, making the entire throne room feel appropriately like a cage. Enslaved dryads hovered nervously near the potted plants. The children of the imperial household, only 7 of them now, stood next to each plant with burning torches in their hands. Since Nero had raised them to be despicable, I supposed they would burn the dryads if I didn't cooperate. My hand rested against my jeans pocket, where I'd tugged Meg's golden rings. I was relieved that at least she wasn't standing with her siblings. I was glad young Cassius had run away from this place. I wondered where the other 3 missing adoptees had gone. If they'd been captured or had fallen in battle to Camp Half-Blood, I tried not to feel any satisfaction at the thought, but it was difficult. Hello. Nero sounded genuinely happy to see me. He reclined on his couch, popping grapes into his mouth from a silver platter at his side. Weapons on the floor, please. Where is Meg? I demanded. Meg? Nero feigned confusion. He scanned the line of his torch-bearing children. Meg? Let's see, where did I leave her? Which one is Meg? The other demigods gave him forced smiles, perhaps not sure if dear old Dad was joking. She's close, Nero assured me, his expression hardening. But first, weapons on the floor. I am taking no chances that you will harm my daughter. You? I was so angry I couldn't finish the sentence. How could someone twist the truth with such brazenness, telling you to the exact opposite of what was clear and obvious, and still sound like they believed what they were saying? How could you defend against lies that were so blatant and brash they should have required no challenge? I put down my bow and quivers. I doubted they would matter. Nero wouldn't have let me into his presence if he thought they were a threat. And the ukulele, he said, and the backpack. Oh, he was good. I set these next to my quivers. I realized that even if I tried something, even if I could throw flames at Nero or shoot him in the face or Apollo smash his horrible purple love seat, it wouldn't matter if his fasces were still intact. He looked completely at ease, as if he knew he was invulnerable. All my bad behaviour would do is hurt others. The dryads would burn. If the demigods refused to burn them, then Nero would have the Germani punish the demigods. And if the Germani hesitated to carry out his orders, well, after what had happened to Lugaselwa, I doubted any of the guards would dare challenge Nero. The Emperor held everyone in this room in a web of fear and threats. But what about Meg? She was the only wild card I could hope to play. As if reading my thoughts, Nero gave me a thin smile. Meg, my dear, he called, it's safe to come forward. She appeared from behind one of the columns in the back of the room. 2 cynocephali flanked her. The wolf-headed men did not touch her, but they walked beside her in such a tight orbit. They reminded me of sheepdogs herding a wayward lamb. Meg looked physically unhurt, though she'd been bathed to within an inch of her life. All the hard-earned grime, ash and dirt she'd accumulated on her way to the tower had been scrubbed away. Her page boy haircut had been reshaped into a layered pixie style, parted in the middle, making Meg resemble the dryads a little too closely. And her clothes. Gone was Sally Jackson's Valentine dress. In its place, Meg wore a sleeveless purple gown, gathered at the waist by a golden cord. Her red high tops had been exchanged for gold-corded sandals. The only thing that remained of her old look was her glasses, without which she couldn't see. But I was surprised Nero had let her keep even those. My heart broke. Meg looked elegant, older, and quite beautiful. She also looked utterly, completely no longer herself. Nero had tried to strip away everything she had been, every choice she'd made, and replace her with someone else, a proper young lady of the imperial household. Her foster siblings watched her approach with undisguised loathing and jealousy. "There you are," Nero said with delight. "Come join me, dear." Meg met my eyes. I tried to transmit how concerned and anguished I felt for her, but her expression remained carefully neutral. She made her way towards Nero, each step cautious, as if the slightest false step or betrayal of emotion might cause invisible mines to explode around her. Nero patted the cushions next to him, but Meg stopped at the base of the dais. I chose to take this as a hopeful sign. Nero's face tightened with displeasure, but he masked it quickly, no doubt deciding, like the professional abusive villain he was, not to exert more pressure than was necessary, to keep the line taut without breaking it. And so, here we are. He spread his arms to take in this special occasion. "Lester, it's a shame you ruined our fireworks display. We could have been down in the parlour right now with our guests, watching a lovely sunset as the city burned. We could have had canapes and cake. But no matter, we still have so much to celebrate. Meg is home." He turned to the white-bearded Germanus. "Vekarux, bring me the remote control, would you?" He gestured vaguely to the coffee table, where a black lacquered tray was piled with tech gadgets. Vekarux lumbered over and picked one. "No, that's for the television," said Nero. "No, that's the DVR. Yes, that's the one, I think." Panic swelled in my throat as I realised what Nero wanted, the control for releasing his Sassanid gas. Naturally, he would keep it with his TV remotes. "Stop," I yelled. "You said Meg would decide." Meg's eyes widened. Apparently, she hadn't heard Nero's plan. She looked back and forth between us, as if worried which of us might attack her first. Watching her inner turmoil made me want to weep. Nero smirked. "Well, of course she will. Meg, my dear, you know the situation. Apollo has failed you yet again. His plans are in ruins. He has sacrificed his allies' lives to make it this far." "That's not true," I said. Nero raised an eyebrow. "No? When I warned you that the tower was a death trap for your demigod friends, did you rush down to save them? Did you hurry them out of the building? I gave you ample time. No, you used them. You let them keep fighting to distract my guards, so you could sneak up here and try to reclaim your precious immortality." What? I didn't?" Nero swept his fruit platter off the sofa. It clattered across the floor. Grapes rolled everywhere. Everyone in the room flinched, including me, and this was obviously Nero's intention. He was a master at theatrics. He knew how to work a crowd, keep us on our toes. He invested his voice with so much righteous indignation, even I wondered if I should believe him. "You are a user, Apollo. You always have been. You leave a wake of ruined lives wherever you go. Hyacinthus, Daphne, Marsyas, Coronus, and your own Oracles. Trophonius, Herophile, the Cumaean Sibyl." He turned to Meg. "You've seen this with your own eyes, my dear. You know what I mean. Oh, Lester, I've been living among mortals for the thousands of years. You know how many lives I've destroyed? None. I've raised a family of orphans." He gestured at his adopted children, some of whom winced, as if he might throw a platter of grapes at them. "I've given them luxury, security, love. I've employed thousands. I've improved the world. But you, Apollo, you've been on Earth barely 6 months. How many lives have you wrecked in that time? How many have died trying to defend you? That poor griffin, Heloise, the Dryad, Moneymaker, Crest, the Pandos, and of course Jason Grace." "Don't you dare," I snarled. Nero spread his hands. "Should I go on? The deaths at Camp Jupiter, Don, Dakota, the parents of that poor little girl Julia. All for what? Because you want to be a god again? You've whined and complained across the country and back again. So I ask you, are you worthy of being a god?" He had done his homework. It wasn't like Nero to remember the names of so many people he didn't care about, but this was an important scene. He was putting on a performance for all of us, especially Meg. "You're twisting everything into lies," I said, "just like you always have for Meg and your other poor children." I shouldn't have called them poor. The 7 torchbearers glared at me with disdain. Clearly, they didn't want my pity. Meg's expression remained blank, but her eyes slid away from me and fixed on the patterns in the carpet. That probably wasn't a good sign. Nero chuckled. "Oh, Apollo, Apollo, you want to lecture me about my poor children? How have you treated yours?" He began rattling off a list of my parenting failures, which were many, but I only half listened. I wondered how much time had passed since I'd seen Screechbling. How long could I keep Nero talking, and would it be enough for the trogs to disable the poison gas, or at least clear the building? Whatever the case, with those blast doors sealed and the windows barred, Meg and I were on our own. We would have to save each other, because no one else would. I had to believe we were still a team. And even now, Nero continued, your children are fighting and dying below while you are here. He shook his head in disgust. I tell you what, let's set aside the issue of fumigating my tower for the moment. He placed the remote control next to him on the sofa, somehow making it seem like an incredibly generous concession that he would wait a few more minutes before gassing all my friends to death. He turned to Meg. My dear, you can choose, as I promised, which of our nature spirits should have the honour of killing the pathetic former god. We will make him fight his own battle for once. Meg stared at Nero, as if he'd just spoken backwards. I can't. She wrung her fingers where her gold rings used to be. I wanted to give them back to her so badly, but I was afraid even to breathe. Meg seemed to be teetering on the edge of an abyss. I feared any change in the room, the slightest vibration in the floor, a shift in the light, a cough or a sigh, might push her over. You can't choose? Nero asked, his voice dripping with sympathy. I understand. We have so many dryads here and they all deserve vengeance. After all, their species has only one natural predator, the Olympian gods. He scowled at me. Meg is right. We will not choose. Apollo, in the name of Daphne and all the other dryads whom you have tormented over the centuries, I decree that all our dryad friends will be allowed to tear you apart. Let's see how you defend yourself when you don't have any demigods to hide behind. He snapped his fingers. The dryads didn't seem too excited about tearing me apart, but the children of the imperial household held their torches closer to their potted trees, and something in the dryads seemed to break, flooding them with desperation, horror, and rage. They may have preferred to attack Nero, but since they couldn't, they did what he asked. They attacked me. Chapter 29. When you're burning trees, and it's allergy season, expect some sniffles. If their hearts had been in it, I would have died. I've seen actual mobs of bloodthirsty dryads attack. It's not something any mortal could live through. These tree spirits seemed more interested in just playing the part. They staggered towards me, yelling, "Rah!" while occasionally glancing over their shoulders to make sure the torch-bearing demigods hadn't set fire to their life sources. I dodged the first two palm tree spirits who lunged at me. I won't fight you, I yelled. A sturdy ficus jumped on me from behind, forcing me to throw her off. We're not enemies. A fiddle-leaf fig was hanging back, perhaps waiting for her turn to get me, or just hoping she wouldn't get noticed. Her demigod keeper noticed, though. He lowered his torch, and the fig tree went up in flames, as if it had been doused in oil. The dryad screamed and combusted, collapsing in a heap of ash. Stop it, Meg said, but her voice was so fragile it barely registered. The other dryads attacked me in earnest, their fingernails stretching into talons. A lemon tree sprouted thorns all over her body and tackled me in a painful hug. Stop it, Meg said, louder this time. Oh, let them try, my dear, Nero said, as the trees piled onto my back. They deserve their revenge. The ficus got me in a chokehold. My knees buckled under the weight of 6 dryads. Thorns and talons raked every bit of exposed skin. I croaked, Meg! My eyes bulged, my vision blurred. Stop, Meg ordered. The dryad stopped. The ficus sobbed with relief and released her hold around my neck. The others backed off, leaving me on my hands and knees, gasping, bruised and bleeding. Meg ran to me. She knelt and put her hand on my shoulder, studying my scrapes and cuts and my ruined bandaged nose with an agonized expression. I would have been overjoyed to get this attention from her if we hadn't been in the middle of Nero's throne room, or if I could just, breathe. Her first whispered question was not the one I'd been expecting. Is Lou alive? I nodded, blinking away tears of pain. Last I saw, I whispered back, still fighting. Meg's brow furrowed. For the moment, her old spirit seemed rekindled, but it was very difficult to visualize her the way she used to be. I had to concentrate on her eyes, framed by her wonderfully horrible cat-eye glasses, and ignore the new wispy haircut, the smell of lilac perfume, the purple gown and gold sandals, and, oh gods, someone had given her a pedicure. I tried to contain my horror. Meg, I said, there's only one person here you need to listen to. Yourself. Trust yourself. I meant it. Despite all my doubts and fears, despite all my complaints over the months about Meg being my master, she had chosen me. But I had also chosen her. I did trust her, not in spite of her past with Nero, but because of it. I had seen her struggle. I'd admired her hard-won progress. I had to believe in her for my own sake. She was, God's help me, my role model. I pulled her gold rings from my pocket. She recoiled when she saw them, but I pressed them into her hands. You are stronger than he is. If I could have just kept her looking nowhere but at me, perhaps we could have survived in a small bubble of our old friendship, even surrounded by Nero's toxic environment. But Nero couldn't allow that. Oh, my dear, he sighed. I appreciate your kind heart, I do, but we can't interfere with justice. Meg stood and faced him. This isn't justice. He smiled thinly. He glanced at me with a mixture of humour and pity, as if saying, now look what you've done. Perhaps you're right, Meg, he conceded. These dryads don't have the courage or the spirit to do what's necessary. Meg stiffened, apparently realising what Nero intended to do. No, we will have to try something else. He gestured to the demigods, who lowered their torches into the plants. No! Meg screamed. The room turned green. A storm of allergens exploded from Meg's body, as if she'd released an entire season of oak pollen in a single blast. Verdant dust coated the throne room. Nero, his couch, his guards, his rugs, his windows, his children. The demigod's torch flames spluttered and died. The dryad's trees began to grow, roots breaking through their pots and anchoring to the floor, new leaves unfurling to replace the singed ones, branches thickening and stretching out, threatening to entangle their demigod minders. Not being complete fools, Nero's children scrambled away from their newly aggressive houseplants. Meg turned to the dryads. They were huddled together, trembling, burn marks steaming on their arms. Go heal, she told them. I'll keep you safe. With a grateful collective sob, they vanished. Nero calmly brushed the pollen from his face and clothes. His German eye seemed unperturbed, as if this sort of thing happened a lot. One of the Cynophasali sneezed. His wolf-headed comrade offered him a Kleenex. My dear Meg, Nero said, his voice even. We've talked about this before. You must control yourself. Meg clenched her fists. You didn't have the right. It wasn't fair. Now, Meg. His voice hardened, letting her know that his patience was strained. Apollo might still be allowed to live, if that's really what you want. We don't have to surrender him to Python, but if we're going to take that kind of risk, I'll need you at my side with your wonderful powers. Be my daughter again. Let me save him for you. She said nothing. Her stance radiated stubbornness. I imagined her putting down her own roots, mooring herself in place. Nero sighed. Everything becomes much, much harder when you wake the beast. You don't want to make the wrong choice again, do you? And lose someone else like you lost your father? He gestured to his dozen pollen-covered Germani, his pair of cynocephali, his 7 demigod foster children, all of whom glared at us as if they, unlike the dryads, would be quite happy to tear us to pieces. I wondered how quickly I could retrieve my bow, though I was in no shape for combat. I wondered how many opponents Meg could handle with her scimitars. Good as she was, I doubted she could fend off 21. Then there was Nero himself, who had the constitution of a minor god. Despite her anger, Meg couldn't seem to make herself look him in the face. I imagined Meg making these same calculations, perhaps deciding that there was no hope, that the only possibility of sparing my life was to give in to Nero. I didn't kill my father, she said, her voice small and hard. I didn't cut off Lou's hands, or enslave those dryads, or twist us all up inside. She swept a hand towards the other demigods of the household. You did that, Nero. I hate you. The Emperor's expression turned sad and weary. I see. Well, if you feel that way. It's not about feelings, Meg snapped. It's about the truth. I'm not listening to you, and I'm not using your weapons to fight my fights anymore. She tossed her rings away. A small, desperate yelp escaped my throat. Nero chuckled. That, my dear, was foolish. For once, I was tempted to agree with the Emperor. No matter how good my young friend was with gourds and pollen, no matter how glad I was to have her at my side, I couldn't imagine us getting out of this room alive, unarmed. The Germani hefted their spears. The imperial demigods drew their swords. The wolf-headed warriors snarled. Nero raised his hand, ready to give the kill command, when behind me, a mighty boom shook the chamber. Half our enemies were thrown off their feet. Cracks sprouted in the windows and the marble columns. Ceiling tiles broke, raining dust like split bags of flour. I turned to see the impenetrable blast doors lying twisted and broken, a strangely emaciated Red Bull standing in the breach. Behind it stood Nico D'Angelo. Safe to say I had not been expecting this kind of party crasher. Clearly Nero and his followers hadn't either. They stared in amazement as the Taurus Sylvestris lumbered across the threshold. Where the bull's blue eyes should have been, there were only dark holes. Its shaggy red hide hung loosely over its reanimated skeleton like a blanket. It was an undead thing with no flesh or soul, just the will of its master. Nico scanned the room. He looked worse than the last time I'd seen him. His face was covered in soot, his left eye swollen shut. His shirt was ripped to shreds, and his black sword dripped with some sort of monster blood. Worst of all, someone, I'm guessing a trog, had forced him to wear a white cowboy hat. I half expected him to say "Yee-haw" in the most unenthusiastic voice ever. For the benefit of his skeleton bull, he pointed at Nero and said, "Kill that one." The bull charged. The followers of Nero went crazy. Germani rushed the creature like linebackers going after a wide receiver, desperate to stop it before it reached the dace. The cynocephali howled and bounded in our direction. The imperial demigods faltered, looking at each other for direction like, who do we attack? The bull? The emo kid? Dad? Each other? This is the problem when you raise your children to be paranoid murderers. "Verkerix!" Nero shrieked, his voice a half octave higher than usual. He leapt onto his couch, madly punching buttons on his Sassanid gas remote control, and apparently deciding that it was not, in fact, his Sassanid gas remote control. "Bring me the other controls, hurry!" Halfway to the bull, Verkerix stumbled and reversed course for the coffee table, perhaps wondering why he'd taken this promotion and why Nero couldn't fetch his own stupid remotes. Meg tugged at my arm, shaking me from my stupor. "Get up." She dragged me out of the path of the cynocephalus, who landed next to us on all fours, snarling and slavering. Before I could decide whether to fight him with my bare hands or my bad breath, Nico leapt between us, his sword already in motion. He slashed the wolfman into dust and dog fur. "Hey guys." Nico's swollen eye made him look even fiercer than usual. "You should probably find some weapons." I tried to remember how to speak. How did you... Wait, let me guess. Rachel sent you? Yep. Our reunion was interrupted by the second wolf-headed warrior, who loped toward us more cautiously than his fallen comrade, edging sideways and looking for an opening. Nico fended him off with his sword and his scary cowboy hat, but I had a feeling we'd be getting more company soon. Nero himself was still screaming on his sofa while Verkerix fumbled with the tray of remote controls. A few feet away from us, the Germani were piling on top of the skeleton bull. Some of the imperial demigods ran to help them, but 3 of the more devious members of the family were hanging back, eyeing us, no doubt pondering the best way to kill us, so they could get a gold star from Daddy on their weekly chore chart. "What about the Sassanid gas?" I asked Nico. "Trogs still working on that?" I muttered a curse that would not have been appropriate for the ears of a youngster like Meg, except that Meg had taught me this particular curse. "Has Camp Half-Blood evacuated?" Meg asked. I was relieved to hear her join the conversation. It made me feel like she was still one of us. Nico shook his head. "No, they're fighting against Nero's forces on every floor. We warned everyone about the gas, but they won't leave until you guys leave." I felt a surge of gratitude and exasperation. Those stupid, beautiful Greek demigods. Those brave, wonderful fools. I wanted to punch them all and then give them a big hug. The cynocephalus lunged. "Go," Nico told us. I sprinted towards the entrance where I'd dropped my supplies, Meg right beside me. A Germanus flew overhead, kicked into oblivion by the bull. The zombie monster was about 20 feet from the Emperor's dace now, struggling to make it to the goal line, but it was losing momentum under the weight of a dozen bodies. The 3 devious demigods were now prowling in our direction, paralleling our course towards the front of the room. By the time I reached my possessions, I was gasping and sweating like I'd just run a marathon. I scooped up my ukulele, knocked an arrow in my bow, and aimed at the approaching demigods. But 2 of them had disappeared. Perhaps they'd taken cover behind the columns. I fired at the only demigod still visible, Amelia. Was it? But either I was weak and slow or she was exceptionally well trained. She dodged my shot and kept coming. "What about weapons for you?" I asked Meg, knocking another arrow. She chin-pointed towards her foster sibling. "I'll take hers. You concentrate on Nero." Off she ran in her silk dress and sandals like she was about to lay waste to a black tie event. Nico was still dueling with the wolf dude. The zombie bull finally collapsed under the weight of Team Nero, meaning it wouldn't be long before the Germani came looking for new targets to tackle. Verkerix tripped and fell as he reached the Emperor's sofa, spilling the entire tray of remote controls across the cushions. That one! That one! Nero yelled unhelpfully, pointing to all of them. I took him aim at Nero's chest. I was thinking how good it would feel to make this shot when someone leapt out of nowhere and stabbed me in the ribs. Clever Apollo. I had found one of the missing demigods. It was one of Nero's older boys, Lucius perhaps. I would have apologized for not remembering his name, but since he had just driven a dagger into my side and now had me locked in a death embrace, I decided we could dispense with formalities. My vision swam. My lungs refused to fill with air. Across the room, Meg fought barehanded against Amelia and the third missing demigod, who had apparently also been waiting in ambush. Lucius drove his knife in deeper. I struggled, sensing with detached medical interest that my ribs had done their job. They deflected the blade from my vital organs, which was great except for the excruciating pain of having a knife embedded between my skin and ribcage, and the massive amount of blood now soaking through my shirt. I couldn't shake Lucius. He was too strong, too close. In desperation, I yanked back my fist and gave him a big thumbs up right in the eye. He screamed and staggered away. Eye injuries, the absolute worst. I'm a medical god, and they even make me squeamish. I didn't have the strength to knock another arrow. I stumbled, trying to stay conscious as I slipped in my own blood. It's always a fun time when Apollo goes to war. Though, through the haze of agony, I saw Nero smiling triumphantly, holding aloft a remote control. Finally. No, I prayed. Zeus, Artemis, Leto, anybody, no. I couldn't stop the Emperor. Meg was too far away, barely holding her own against her two siblings. The bull had been battered into a pile of bones. Nico had dispatched the Wolfman, but now faced a line of angry Gemini between him and the throne. It's over, Nero gloated. Death to my enemies. And he pushed the button. Chapter 30. Staying alive is really hard when you're always trying to kill me. Death to my enemies was an excellent battle cry, a true classic, delivered with conviction. Some of the drama was lost, however, when Nero pushed the button and the shades on the windows began to lower. The Emperor uttered a curse, perhaps one Meg had taught him, and dived into his sofa cushions, looking for the correct remote. Meg had disarmed Amelia, as she'd promised, and was now swinging her borrowed sword while more and more of her foster siblings encircled her, anxious to have a part in taking her down. Nico waded through the Gemini. They outnumbered him more than 10 to 1, but they quickly developed a healthy respect for his Stygian iron blade. Even barbarians can master a steep learning curve if it is sharp and painful enough. Nico couldn't last forever against so many, though, especially since their spears had a longer reach, and Nico could only see through his right eye. Vercerix barked at his men, ordering them to surround D'Angelo. Unfortunately, the grizzled lieutenant seemed much better at mustering his forces than he was at delivering remote controls. As for me, how can I explain the difficulties of using a bow after being stabbed in the side? I was not dead yet, which confirmed that the blade had missed all my important arteries and organs, but raising my arm made me want to scream in pain. Actually, aiming and drawing my bow was torture worse than anything in the fields of punishment, and Hades can quote me on that. I'd lost blood. I was sweating and shivering. Nevertheless, my friends needed me. I had to do what I could. Mountain Dew, I muttered, trying to clear my head. First, I kicked Lucius in the face and knocked him out, because the sneaky little so-and-so deserved it. Then I fired an arrow at one of the other Imperial demigods, who was about to stab Meg in the back. I was reluctant to kill, remembering Cassius's terrified face in the elevator, but I hit my target in the ankle, causing him to scream and do the chicken walk around the throne room. That was satisfying. My real problem was Nero. With Meg and Nico overwhelmed, the Emperor had plenty of time to fish through his sofa cushions for remotes. The fact that his blast doors were destroyed did not seem to dampen his enthusiasm for flooding the tower with poison gas. Perhaps being a minor god, he would be immune. Perhaps he gargled with sassanide gas every morning. I fired at the Emperor's centre mass, a shot that should have split the sternum. Instead, the arrow shattered on his toga. The garment had some form of protective magic, perhaps. Either that or it was made by a really good tailor. With a great deal of pain, I knocked another arrow. This time I targeted Nero's head. I was reloading much too slowly. Every shot was an ordeal for my tortured body. But my aim was true. The arrow hit him right between the eyes and shattered uselessly. He scowled at me from across the room. Stop that! Then he went back to searching for his remote. My spirits fell even further. Clearly, Nero was still invulnerable. Lucaselva had failed to destroy his fasces. That meant we faced an emperor who had 3 times the power of Caligula or Commodus, and they hadn't exactly been pushovers. If Nero ever stopped obsessing about his poisonous gadget and actually attacking us, we would be dead. New strategy. I aimed at the remote controls. As he picked up the next one, I shot it out of his hand. Nero snarled and grabbed another. I couldn't fire fast enough. He pointed the gadget at me and mashed the buttons like this might erase me from existence. Instead, 3 giant TV screens lowered from the ceiling and flickered to life. The first showed local news, a live feed from a helicopter circling this very tower. Apparently, we were on fire. So much for the tower being indestructible. The second screen showed a PGA tournament. The third was split between Fox News and MSNBC, which, side by side, should have been enough to cause an antimatter explosion. I suppose it was a sign of Nero's apolitical bent, or perhaps his multiple personalities, that he watched them both. Nero growled in frustration and tossed the remote away. "Apollo, stop fighting me. You will die anyway. Don't you understand that? It's me or the reptile." The statement rattled me, making my next shot go wide. It hit the groin of the long-suffering Vercarix, who went cross-legged in pain as the arrow corroded his body to ash. "Dude," I muttered, "I'm so sorry." At the far end of the room, behind Nero's dais, more barbarians appeared, marching to the Emperor's defence with their spears ready. Did Nero have a broom closet packed with reinforcements back there? That was totally unfair. Meg was still encircled by her foster siblings. She'd managed to get a shield, but she was hopelessly outnumbered. I understood her desire to abandon the dual scimitars Nero had given her, but I was starting to question the timing of that decision. Also, she seemed determined not to kill her attackers, but her foster siblings had no such reservations. The other demigods closed in around her, their confident smirks indicating that they sensed imminent victory. Nico was losing steam against the Gemini. His sword seemed to become 10 pounds heavier every time he swung it. I reached for my quivers and realised I had only one arrow left to shoot, not including my Shakespearean life coach from Dodona. Nero pulled out yet another remote. Before I could take aim, he pressed a button. A mirror ball lowered from the middle of the ceiling. Lights flashed. The Bee Gees' Staying Alive began to play, which everyone knows is one of the top 10 omens of impending doom in the Prophecy for Morons handbook. Nero threw away the remote and picked up, oh gods, the last controller. The last one is always the right one. "Nico," I yelled. I had no chance of bringing Nero down. Instead, I fired at the Germanus, who stood directly between the son of Hades and the throne, blasting the barbarian to nothingness. Bless his fancy cowboy hat, Nico understood. He charged, breaking out of the ring of Gemini and leaping straight for the Emperor with all his remaining strength. Nico's downward slash should have cleaved Nero from head to devil tail, but with his free hand the Emperor grabbed the blade and stopped it cold. The Stygian iron hissed and smoked in his grip. Golden blood trickled from between his fingers. He yanked the blade away from Nico and tossed it across the room. Nico lunged at Nero's throat, ready to choke him or make him into a Halloween skeleton. The Emperor backhanded him with such force the son of Hades flew 20 feet and slammed into the nearest pillar. "You fools cannot kill me!" Nero roared to the beat of the Bee Gees. "I am immortal!" He clicked his remote. Nothing obvious happened, but the Emperor screeched with delight. "That's it! That's the one! All your friends are dead now! Ha ha ha!" Meg screamed in outrage. She tried to break out of her circle of attackers, as Nico had done, but one of the demigods tripped her. She crashed face first into the carpet. Her borrowed sword clattered from her grip. I wanted to run to her aid, but I knew I was too far away. Even if I shot the arrow of Dodona, I couldn't take down an entire group of demigods. We had failed. In the tower below, our friends would now be choking to death, the entire camp wiped out with a single click of Nero's remote. The Gemini hauled Nico to his feet and dragged him before the throne. The Imperial demigods pointed their weapons at Meg, now prone and helpless. "Excellent," Nero beamed. "But first things first. Guards, kill Apollo." The Gemini reinforcements barreled towards me. I fumbled for my ukulele, desperately reviewing my repertoire for a song that would produce a stunning reversal of fortunes. "I believe in miracles. Make it right." Behind me, a familiar voice roared, "Stop!" The tone was so commanding, even Nero's guards and family members turned towards the broken blast doors. On the threshold stood Will Solis, radiating brilliant light. At his left was Lugaselwa, alive and well, her stumps now outfitted with daggers instead of silverware. At Will's right was Rachel Elizabeth Dare, holding a large axe wrapped in a golden bundle of rods, the fasces of Nero. "No one hits my boyfriend," Will thundered, "and no one kills my dad." Nero's guards made ready to attack, but the Emperor cried, "Everyone freeze!" His voice was so shrill that several of the Gemini looked back to be sure he was the one who had spoken. The demigods of the imperial family did not look pleased. They'd been about to give Meg the Julius Caesar in the Senate treatment, but at Nero's command they stayed their weapons. Rachel Dare scanned the room, the pollen-covered furniture and barbarians, the overgrown dryad trees, the pile of bull bones, the cracked windows and columns, the shades still going up and down on their own, the TVs blaring, the Bee Gees playing, the disco ball swirling. "What have you guys been doing in here?" she muttered. Will Solis strode confidently across the room, barking, "Out of my way!" to the Gemini. He marched straight to Nico and helped the son of Hades to his feet. Then he dragged Nico back to the entrance. No one tried to stop him. The Emperor inched backwards on his dais. He put one hand behind him, as if to reassure himself that his sofa was still there in case he needed to faint dramatically. He ignored Will and Nico. His eyes were fixed on Rachel and the fasces. You. Nero wagged his finger at my red-headed friend. You're the Pythia. Rachel hefted the fasces in her arms like a baby, a very heavy, pointy, golden baby. Rachel, Elizabeth Dare, she said, and right now I'm the girl holding your life in her hands. Nero licked his lips. He frowned and then grimaced, as if exercising his facial muscles for an on-stage soliloquy. You all should be dead. He sounded both polite and vexed, as if chiding our comrades for not calling first before dropping by for dinner. From behind Lucas Selwer, a smaller figure emerged. Screechbling, CEO of Troglodyte Inc., festooned with 6 new hats atop his tricorn. His grin was almost as bright as Will Solis. Gas traps are finicky, he said. Have to be sure the detonators are working. He opened his hand and left 4 9-volt batteries tumble to the floor. Nero glared at his foster children as if to say, you had one job. And how exactly, Nero blinked and squinted. The glow of his own fasces seemed to hurt his eyes. The Leontocephaline. You couldn't have defeated him. I didn't. Lou stepped forward, allowing me a closer look at her new attachments. Someone, I guessed Will, had fixed her up with fresh bandages, more surgical tape and better blades, giving her a low-budget Wolverine look. I traded what the Guardian required, my immortality. But you don't have. Nero's throat seemed to close up. A look of dread came over his face, which was like watching someone press on wet sand and expel water from the centre. I had to laugh. It was totally inappropriate, but it felt good. Lou has immortality, I said, because you're immortal. The two of you have been connected for centuries. Nero's eye twitched. But that's my eternal life. You can't trade my life for my life. Lou shrugged. It's a little shady, I agree, but the Leontocephaline seemed to find it amusing. Nero stared at her in disbelief. You would kill yourself just to kill me? In a heartbeat, Lou said. But it won't come to that. I'm just a regular mortal now. Destroying the fascists will do the same to you. She gestured to her Germanic former comrades. And all your other guards too. They'll be free of your bondage. Then we'll see how long you last. Nero laughed as abruptly as I had. You can't. Don't any of you understand? All the power of the triumvirate is mine now. My fascists. His eyes lit with sudden hope. You haven't destroyed it yet because you can't. Even if you could, you'd release so much power it would burn you to cinders. And even if you didn't mind dying, the power, all the power I've been accumulating for centuries, would just sink into Delphi. To him. You don't want that, believe me. The terror in his voice was absolutely genuine. I finally realised just how much fear he'd been living with. Python had always been the real power behind the throne. A bigger puppet master than Nero's mother had ever been. Like most bullies, Nero had been shaped and manipulated by an even stronger abuser. You, Pythia, he said. Raquel. Rachel. That's what I said. I can influence the reptile. I can convince him to give you your powers back. But kill me, and all is lost. He doesn't think like a human. He has no mercy, no compassion. He'll destroy the future of our kind. Rachel shrugged. Seems to me that you've chosen your kind, Nero, and it isn't humanity. Nero cast his eyes desperately around the room. He fixed his gaze on Meg, who was now on her feet, swaying wearily in the circle of her imperial siblings. Meg, dear, tell them. I said I would let you choose. I trust your sweet nature, your good senses. Meg regarded him as if he were a distasteful wall painting. She addressed her foster siblings. What you guys have done up till now, it isn't your fault. It's Nero's fault. But now you've got to make a choice. Stand up to him, like I did. Drop your weapons. Nero hissed. Ungrateful child. The beast is dead. Meg tapped the side of her head. I killed it. Surrender, Nero. My friends will let you live in a nice prison somewhere. It's more than you deserve. That, Lou said, is the best deal you're going to get, Emperor. Tell your followers to stand down. Nero looked on the verge of tears. He seemed like he was ready to set aside centuries of tyranny and power struggles and to betray his reptile overlord. Villainy, after all, was a thankless, exhausting job. He took a deep breath. Then he screamed, Kill them all! And a dozen Germani charged me. Chapter 31. Godly Tug of War. Not recommended for kids, or Leicesters either. We all make our choices. Mine was to turn and run. Not that I was terrified of a dozen Germani trying to kill me. Okay, yes, I was terrified of a dozen Germani trying to kill me, but also I had no arrows and no strength left. I badly wanted to stand next to Rachel, Screechblinger, my old friend, and the low-budget Celtic Wolverine. And Nero's words rang in my ears. Destroying the fascist would be deadly. I could not allow anyone else to take that risk. Perhaps the Leontocephaline had been amused for reasons Lou hadn't understood. Perhaps my sacrifice couldn't be avoided as easily as she believed. I stumbled into Lugosella, who managed to catch me without stabbing me to death. Will, still glowing like an overachieving nightlight, had propped Nico against the wall and was now tending to his wounds. Screechbing let out a high-pitched whistle, and more troglodytes poured into the room, charging the Emperor's forces in a flurry of shrieks, mining picks and stylish headwear. I gasped for breath, making a grabby hand gesture at Rachel. "Give me the fasces." "Please?" she prompted. "And gee, sorry, I underestimated you, Rachel. You're actually kind of a warrior queen." "Yes, please, and thank you, and all of that." Lou scowled. "Apollo, are you sure you can destroy it? Without killing yourself?" "No, and no," I said. Rachel stared into the air, as if reading a prophecy written in the dancing lights of the disco ball. "I can't see the outcome," she said, "but he has to try." I took the fascis, struggling not to collapse under its weight. The ceremonial weapon hummed and shuddered like an overheating race car engine. Its aura made my pores pop and my ears ring. My side started to bleed again, as if it had ever really stopped. I wasn't thrilled about the blood trickling down my chest and into my underwear while I had an important job to do. Sorry again, underwear. "Cover me," I told the ladies. Lou leapt into battle, stabbing, slashing and kicking any Gemini who got past the troglodytes. Rachel pulled out a blue plastic hairbrush and threw it at the nearest barbarian, beating him in the eye and making him howl. "Sorry, I underestimated you, Rachel," I thought distantly. "You're actually kind of a hairbrush ninja." I cast a worried glance across the room. Meg was all right. More than all right. She had convinced all her remaining foster siblings to throw down their weapons. Now she stood in front of them like a general trying to shore up her demoralised troops. Or, a less flattering comparison, she reminded me of one of Hades' dog trainers working with a pack of new hellhounds. At the moment, the demigods were obeying her commands and staying put. But any sign of weakness from her, any change in the temperature of the battle, and they might break ranks and slaughter everyone in sight. It didn't help that Nero was stomping up and down on his couch, screeching, "Kill Apollo! Kill Apollo!" as if I were a cockroach he just spotted scurrying across the floor. For Meg's sake, I had to hurry. I gripped the fascis with both hands and tried to prise it apart. The golden bundle of rods glowed brighter and warmer, illuminating the bones and red flesh of my fingers, but it didn't budge. "Come on," I muttered, trying again, hoping for a burst of godly strength. "If you need another immortal life as a sacrifice, I'm right here." Maybe I should have felt foolish negotiating with a Roman ceremonial axe, but after my conversations with the Arrow of Dodona, it seemed like a reasonable thing to try. The troglodytes made the Gemini look like the bumbling team the Harlem Globetrotters always played. Sorry, Washington Generals. Lou sliced and poked and parried with her knife hands. Rachel stood protectively in front of me and occasionally muttered, "Apollo, now will be good," which I did not find helpful. Meg still had her foster siblings under control for the time being, but that could change. She was talking to them encouragingly, gesturing to me with a look that said, "Apollo has this. He'll destroy Dad any minute. Just watch." I wished I shared her certainty. I took a shaky breath. I can do this. I just need to concentrate. How hard can it be to destroy myself? I tried to break the fascis over my knee, which nearly broke my knee. At last, Nero lost his cool. I suppose there was only so much satisfaction he could get from stomping on his sofa and screaming at his minions. "Do I have to do everything myself?" he yelled. "Do I have to kill you all? You forget I am a god!" He jumped off his couch and marched straight towards me, his whole body starting to glow, because Will Solis couldn't have his own thing. Oh no, Nero had to glow too. Trogs swarmed the Emperor. He tossed them aside. Gemini, who didn't get out of his way fast enough, were also thrown into the next time zone. Meg looked like she wanted to challenge Nero herself, but any move away from her foster siblings would have shattered their delicate standoff. Nico was still only half conscious. Will was busy trying to revive him. That left Lou and Rachel as my last line of defence. I couldn't have that. They'd been in harm's way for my sake enough already. Nero might have been the most minor of minor gods, but he still had divine strength. His glow was getting brighter as he approached the fasces. Like Will, like me, in my own godly moments of rage. A thought came to me, or maybe something deeper than a thought, a sort of instinctive recognition. Like Caligula, Nero had always wanted to be the new sun god. He designed his giant golden colossus to look like my body, with his head on it. This fasces wasn't just his symbol of power and immortality, it was his claim to godhood. What had he asked me earlier? Are you worthy of being a god? That was the central question. He believed he made a better deity than I did. Perhaps he was right, or perhaps neither of us were worthy. There was one way to find out. If I couldn't destroy the fascist myself, maybe with a little godly help. Get out of the way, I told Lou and Rachel. They glanced back at me like I was crazy. Run, I told them. They broke to either side just before Nero would have ploughed through them. The Emperor stopped in front of me, his eyes flickering with power. You lose, he said. Give it to me. Take it if you can. I began to glow myself. Radiance intensified around me, as it had months ago in Indianapolis, but slower this time, building to a crescendo. The fascists pulsed in sympathy, beginning to superheat. Nero snarled and grabbed the handle of the axe. To our mutual surprise, the strength of my grip was equal to his. We played tug-of-war, swinging the blade back and forth, trying to kill each other, but neither of us could win. The glow around us increased like a feedback loop, bleaching the carpet under our feet, whitening the black marble columns. Gerb and I had to stop fighting just to shield their eyes. Trogs screamed and retreated, their dark goggles insufficient protection. You cannot take it, Lester, Nero said through clenched teeth, pulling with all his might. I am Apollo, I said, tugging the other direction, god of the sun, and I revoke your divinity. The fascist cracked in two, the shaft shattering, the rods and golden blade exploding like a firebomb. A tsunami of flames washed over me, along with thousands of years of Nero's pent-up rage, fear and insatiable hunger, the twisted sources of his power. I stood my ground, but Nero hurtled backwards and landed on the carpet, his clothes smouldering, his skin mottled with burns. My glow started to fade. I was unharmed, or at least no more harmed than I'd been before. The fascist was broken, but Nero remained alive and intact. Had all this been for nothing then? At least he wasn't gloating anymore. Instead, the Emperor sobbed in despair. What have you done? Don't you see? Only then did he begin to crumble. His fingers disintegrated. His toga frayed into smoke. A glittery cloud plumed from his mouth and nose, as if he were exhaling his life force, along with his final breaths. Worst of all, this glitter didn't simply vanish. It poured downward, seeping into the Persian rug, worming into cracks between the floor tiles, almost as if Nero were being pulled, clawed and dragged into the depths, piece by piece. You've given him victory, he whimpered. The last of his mortal form dissolved and soaked through the floor. Everyone in the room stared at me. The German and I dropped their weapons. Nero was finally gone. I wanted to feel joy and relief, but all I felt was exhaustion. Is it over? Lou asked. Rachel stood next to me, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. Not yet. Not even close. My consciousness was dimming, but I knew she was right. I understood the real threat now. I had to get going. There was no time to waste. Instead, I toppled into Rachel's arms and passed out. I found myself hovering over a different throne room, the Council of the Gods on Mount Olympus. Thrones curved around Hestia's great hearth, forming a U. My family, such as they were, sat watching a holographic image that floated above the flames. It was me, lying passed out in Rachel's arms in Nero's tower. So, I was watching them, watch me, watch them. Nope, too meta. This is the most critical time, Athena said. She was dressed in her usual armour and oversized helmet, which I'm pretty sure she stole from Marvin the Martian in Looney Tunes. He is perilously close to failure. Ares sat back and crossed his arms. I wish he'd get on with it then. I have 20 golden drachma riding on this. That is so callous, Hermes chided. Besides, it's 30 drachmas, and I gave you very good odds. He pulled out a leather-bound notepad and a pencil. Any final bets, people? Stop, Zeus rumbled. He was dressed in a sombre black three-piece suit, as if on his way to my funeral. His shaggy black beard was freshly combed and oiled. His eyes flickered with subdued lightning. He almost looked concerned for my situation. Then again, he was as good an actor as Nero. We must wait for the final battle, he announced. The worst is yet to come. Hasn't he proved himself already? Artemis demanded. My heart ached, seeing my sister again. He suffered more in these last few months than even you could have expected. Whatever lesson you were trying to teach him, dear father, he's learned it. Zeus glowered. You do not understand all the forces at work here, daughter. Apollo must face the final challenge, for all our sakes. Hephaestus sat forward in his mechanical recliner, adjusting his leg braces. And if he fails, what then? 11 Olympian gods? That's a terribly unbalanced number. It could work, Aphrodite said. Don't you start, Artemis snapped. Aphrodite batted her eyelashes, feigning innocence. What? I'm just saying some pantheons have way less than 12, or we could elect a new 12th. A god of climate disasters, Ares suggested. That would be awesome. He and I could work well together. Stop it, all of you. Queen Hera had been sitting back with a dark veil over her face. Now she lifted it. To my surprise, her eyes were red and swollen. She'd been crying. This has gone on long enough. Too much loss, too much pain. But if my husband insists on seeing it through, the least you all can do is not talk about Apollo as if he's already dead. Wow, I thought. Who is this woman and what has she done with my stepmother? Non-existent, Athena amended. If he fails, his fate will be much worse than death. But whatever happens, it begins now. They all leaned forward, staring at the vision in the flames as my body began to stir. Then I was back in my mortal form, looking up, not at the Olympians, but at the faces of my friends. Chapter 32. The final push, fam. Not throwing away my shot. Wait, where is my shot? I was dreaming. I pointed weakly at Meg. And you weren't there. Neither were you, Lou, or Nico and Will. Will and Nico exchanged worried looks, no doubt wondering if I had suffered brain damage. We need to get you to camp, Will said. I'll get one of the Pegasi. No. I struggled to sit up. I have to leave. Lou snorted. Look at yourself, buddy. You're in worse shape than I am. She was right, of course. At the moment, I doubted my hands were working as well as Lou's dagger attachments. My whole body shook with exhaustion. My muscles felt like worn-out tension cords. I had more cuts and bruises than the average rugby team. Nevertheless, I have no choice, I said. Nectar, please. And supplies. More arrows. My bow. He's right, unfortunately, Rachel said. Python. She clenched her jaw as if forcing down a belch of serpent prophecy gas. Python is getting stronger by the second. Everyone looked grim, but no one argued. After all we'd been through, though, why would they? My confrontation with Python was just another impossible task in a day of impossible tasks. I'll gather some supplies. Rachel kissed my forehead and then dashed off. Bow and quiver coming up, Nico said. And ukulele, Will added. Nico winced. Do we really hate Python that much? Will raised an eyebrow. Fine. Nico dashed off without kissing me on the forehead, which was just as well. He couldn't have reached my forehead with the massive brim of his cowboy hat. Lou glowered at me. You did good, cellmate. Was I crying? Had there been any point in the last 24 hours when I hadn't been crying? Lou, you're good people. I'm sorry I mistrusted you. Hey, she waved one of her daggers. That's okay. I thought you were pretty useless too. I didn't say useless. I should go check on the former Imperial family, she said. They're looking a little lost without General Sapling. She winked at Meg and then lumbered off. Will pressed a vial of nectar into my hands. Drink this and this. He passed me a Mountain Dew. And here's some salve for those wounds. He handed the jar to Meg. Could you do the honours? I have to find some more bandages. I used up my supply outfitting Lugaselwa dagger hands. He hurried away, leaving me alone with Meg. She sat next to me, cross-legged, and started finger-painting my ouchies with healing ointment. She had plenty of ouchies to choose from. I alternated drinking my nectar and Mountain Dew, which was sort of like alternating between premium gasoline and regular gasoline. Meg had thrown away her sandals, braving bare feet despite the arrows, rubble, bones, and discarded blades that littered the floor. Someone had given her an orange Camp Half-Blood shirt, which she put on over her dress, making her allegiance clear. She still looked older and more sophisticated, but she also looked like Meg. I'm so proud of you, I said. I definitely was not weeping like a baby. You were so strong, so brilliant, so... Ow! She poked the dagger wound in my side, effectively silencing my compliments. Yeah, I know. I had to be. For them. She chin-pointed to her wayward foster siblings who had broken down in the wake of Nero's death. A couple of them stormed around the room, throwing things and screaming hateful comments, while Lugaselwa and some of our demigods stood by, giving them space, watching to make sure the Imperials didn't hurt themselves or anyone else. Another child of Nero was curled up and sobbing between two Aphrodite campers who'd been pressed into service as grief counsellors. Nearby, one of the youngest Imperials appeared catatonic in the arms of a Hypnos camper, who rocked the child back and forth while singing lullabies. In the space of an evening, the Imperial children had gone from enemies to victims who needed help, and Camp Half-Blood was stepping up to the challenge. They'll need time, Meg said, and a lot of good support, like I got. They'll need you, I added. You showed them the way out. She gave me a one-shoulder shrug. You really got a lot of wounds. I let her work, but as I sipped my high-octane beverages, I considered that perhaps courage was a self-perpetuating cycle, like abuse. Nero had hoped to create miniature, tortured versions of himself, because that made him feel stronger. Meg had found the strength to oppose him because she saw how much her foster siblings needed her to succeed, to show them another way. There were no guarantees. The imperial demigods had dealt with so much for so long. Some of them might never be able to come back from the darkness. Then again, there had been no guarantees for Meg either. There were still no guarantees that I would come back from what awaited me in the caverns of Delphi. All any of us would do was try and hope that, in the end, the virtuous cycle would break the vicious one. I scanned the rest of the throne room, wondering how long I had been unconscious. Outside it was full dark. Emergency lights pulsed against the side of the neighbouring building from the street far below. The thwomp, thwomp, thwomp of a helicopter told me we were still making local news. Most of the troglodytes had vanished, though Screechbling and a few of his lieutenants were here, having what looked like a serious conversation with Sherman Yang. Perhaps they were negotiating a division of the spoils of war. I imagined Camp Half-Blood was about to flush with Greek fire and Imperial gold weapons, while the Trogs would have a fabulous new selection of haberdashery and whatever lizards and rocks they could find. Demigod children of Demeter were tending the overgrown dryads, discussing how best to transport them back to camp. Over by the Emperor's Dace, some of the Apollo kids, my kids, conducted triage operations. Jerry, Jan and Gracie, the newbies from camp, now all looked like seasoned pros, shouting orders to the stretcher-bearers, examining the wounded, treating campers and Germani alike. The barbarians looked glum and dejected. None seemed to have the slightest interest in fighting. A few sported injuries that should have made them crumble to ash, but they were no longer creatures of Nero, bound to the living world by his power. They were just humans again, like Lugaselwa. They would have to find a new purpose for their remaining years, and I supposed none of them loved the idea of staying loyal to the cause of a dead emperor. You were right, I told Meg, about trusting Lugaselwa. I was wrong. Meg patted my knuckles. Just keep saying that. I'm right, you're wrong. Been waiting months for you to realise it. She gave me a little smirk. Again, I could only marvel at how much she'd changed. She still looked ready to do a cartwheel for no reason, or wipe her nose on her sleeve with zero shame, or eat an entire birthday cake just because yum. But she was no longer the half-wild, alley-dwelling urchin I'd met in January. She'd grown taller and more confident. She'd carried herself like someone who owned this tower, and for all I knew she might, now that Nero was dead, assuming the whole place didn't burn down. My voice failed me. Meg, I have to... I know. She looked away long enough to wipe her cheek, knocking her glasses cockeyed in the process. You have to do this next part, on your own, huh? I thought about the last time I'd physically stood in the depths of Delphi, where Meg and I had inadvertently wandered there through the labyrinth during a three-legged race. Those were simpler times. The situation now was different. Python had grown too powerful. Having seen his lair in my dreams, I knew that no demigod could survive that place. The poisonous air alone would burn away flesh and melt lungs. I did not expect to survive there long myself, but in my heart I had always known this would be a one-way trip. I must do this alone, I agreed. How? Leave it to Meg to distill the most important crisis of my 4,000-year-plus life into a single unanswerable question. I shook my head, wishing I had an unquestionable answer. I guess I have to trust that I won't screw up. Oh, shut it, McCaffrey. She forced a smile. After a few moments of putting salve on my wounds, she said, So, this is goodbye? She swallowed that last word. I tried to find my voice. I seemed to have lost it somewhere down in my intestines. I will find you, Meg, afterwards, assuming no screw-ups. I made a sound between a laugh and a sob. Yes, but either way. She nodded. Even if I survived, I would not be the same. The best I could hope for was to emerge from Delphi with my godhood restored, which was what I had wanted and dreamed about for the past half year. So why did I feel so reluctant about leaving behind the broken, battered form of Lester Papadopoulos? Just come back to me, dummy. That's an order. Meg gave me a gentle hug, conscious of my injuries. Then she got to her feet and ran off to check on the imperial demigods, her former family, and possibly her family yet to be. My other friends all seemed to understand too. Will did some last-minute bandaging. Nico handed me my weapons. Rachel gave me a new backpack stuffed with supplies. But none of them offered any lingering goodbyes. They knew every minute counted now. They wished me luck and let me go. As I passed, Screechbling and the troglodyte lieutenants stood at attention and removed their headwear. All 620 hats. I recognised the honour. I nodded my thanks and forged on across the broken threshold before I could melt into another fit of ugly sobbing. I passed Austin and Kayla in the antechamber, tending to more wounded and directing younger demigods in clean-up efforts. They both gave me weary smiles, acknowledging the million things we didn't have time to say. I pushed onward. I ran into Chiron by the elevators, on his way to deliver more medical supplies. "You came to our rescue," I said. "Thank you." He looked down at me benevolently, his head nearly scraping the ceiling, which had not been designed to accommodate centaurs. "We all have a duty to rescue each other, wouldn't you say?" I nodded, wondering how the centaur had become so wise over the centuries, and why that same wisdom had not escaped me until I had been Lesterized. "And did your joint task force meeting go well?" I asked, trying to remember what Dionysus had told us about why Chiron had been away. It seemed like so long ago. Something about a severed cat's head? Chiron chuckled. "A severed head and a cat. Two different people, acquaintances of mine from other pantheons. We were discussing a mutual problem." He just threw that information out there as if it wasn't a brain-exploding grenade. Chiron had acquaintances from other pantheons? Of course he did. And a mutual problem? "Do I want to know?" I asked. "No," he said gravely. "You really don't." He offered his hand. "Good luck, Apollo." We shook, and off I went. I found the stairs and took them. I didn't trust the elevators. During my dream in the cell, I'd seen myself sweeping down the stairwells of the tower when I fell to Delphi. I was determined to take the same path in real life. Maybe it wouldn't matter, but I would have felt silly if I took a wrong turn on my way to confront Python and ended up getting arrested by the NYPD in the Triumvirate Holdings lobby. My bow and quiver jostled against my back, clanging against my ukulele strings. My new supply pack felt cold and heavy. I held on to the railing so my wobbly legs wouldn't collapse under me. My ribs felt like they'd been newly tattooed with lava. But considering everything I'd been through, I felt remarkably whole. Maybe my mortal body was giving me one last push. Maybe my godly constitution was kicking in to help. Maybe it was the nectar and Mountain Dew cocktail coursing through my bloodstream. Whatever it was, I would take all the help I could get. 10 floors. 20 floors. I lost track. Stairwells are horrible. Disorienting places. I was alone with the sound of my breathing and the pounding of my feet against the steps. A few more floors and I began to smell smoke. The hazy air stung my eyes. Apparently part of the building was still on fire. Awesome. The smoke got thicker as I continued to descend. I began to cough and gag. I pressed my forearm over my nose and mouth and found that this did not make a very good filter. My consciousness swam. I considered opening a side door and trying to find fresh air, but I couldn't see any exits. Weren't stairwells supposed to have those? My lungs screamed. My oxygen-deprived brain felt like it was about to pop out of my skull, sprout wings and fly away. I realized I might be starting to hallucinate. Brains with wings. Cool. I trudged forward. Wait. What happened to the stairs? When I had reached a level surface, I could see nothing through the smoke. The ceiling got lower and lower. I stretched out my hands, searching for any kind of support. On either side of me, my fingers brushed against warm, solid rock. The passageway continued to shrink. Ultimately, I was forced to crawl, sandwiched between two horizontal sheets of stone, with barely enough room to raise my head. My ukulele wedged itself in my armpit. My quiver scraped against the ceiling. I began to squirm and hyperventilate from claustrophobia, but I forced myself to calm down. I was not stuck. I could breathe, strangely enough. The smoke had changed to volcanic gas, which tasted terrible and smelled worse, but my burning lungs somehow continued to process it. My respiratory system might melt later, but right now I was still sucking in the sulfur. I knew this smell. I was somewhere in the tunnels beneath Delphi. Thanks to the magic of the labyrinth and or some strange sorcerer's high-speed link that connected Nero's tower to the reptile's lair, I had climbed, walked, stumbled and crawled halfway across the world in a few minutes. My aching legs felt every mile. I wriggled onward towards a dim light in the distance. Rumbling noises echoed through a much larger space ahead. Something huge and heavy was breathing. The crawl space ended abruptly. I found myself peering down from the lip of a small crevice, like an air vent. Below me spread an enormous cavern, the lair of Python. When I had fought Python before, thousands of years ago, I hadn't needed to seek out this place. I had lured him into the upper world and fought him in the fresh air and sunlight, which had been much better. Now, looking down from my crawl space, I wished I could be anywhere else. The floor stretched for several football fields, punctuated by stalagmites and split by a web of glowing volcanic fissures that spewed plumes of gas. The uneven rock surface was covered with a shag carpet of horror, centuries of discarded snakeskins, bones and the desiccated carcasses of... I didn't want to know. Python had all those volcanic crevices right there, and he couldn't be bothered to incinerate his trash? The monster himself, roughly the size of a dozen jackknife cargo trucks, took up the back quarter of the cavern. His body was a mountain of reptilian coils, rippling with muscle, but he was more than simply a big snake. Python shifted and changed as it suited him, sprouting clawed feet or vestigial bat wings, or extra hissing heads along the side of his body, all of which withered and dropped off as rapidly as they formed. He was the reptilian conglomeration of everything that mammals feared in their deepest, most primal nightmares. I'd suppressed the memory of just how hideous he was. I preferred him when he'd been obscured in poisonous fumes. His cab-sized head rested on one of his coils. His eyes were closed, but that did not fool me. The monster never really slept. He only waited for his hunger to swell, for his chance at world domination, for small, foolish Lesters to jump into his cave. At that moment, a shimmering haze seemed to be settling over him, like the embers of a spectacular fireworks show. With nauseating certainty, I realized I was watching Python absorb the last remnants of the fallen triumvirate's power. The reptile looked blissful, soaking in all that warm, Nero-y goodness. I had to hurry. I had one shot at defeating my old enemy. I was not ready. I was not rested. I was definitely not bringing my A game. In fact, I'd been so far below my A game for so long that I could barely remember any letters north of LMNOP. Yet somehow I'd got this far. I felt a tingly sensation of power building just under my skin, perhaps my divine self, trying to reassert itself in the proximity of my old archenemy. I hoped it was that and not just my mortal body combusting. I managed to maneuver my bow into my hands, draw an arrow and nock it. No easy task while lying flat on your belly in a crawl space. I even managed to avoid wanging my ukulele against the rocks and giving away my position with a rousing open chord. So far, so good. Deep breath. This was for Meg. This was for Jason. This was for everyone who had fought and sacrificed to drag my sorry mortal butt from quest to quest for the last 6 months, just to get me this chance at redemption. I kicked forward, spilling headfirst out of the crack in the ceiling. I flipped in midair, aimed, and fired my arrow at Python's head. Chapter 33. Seriously, guys, I know my shot was right here. Help me look for it. I missed. Don't even pretend you're surprised. Rather than piercing the monster's skull as I'd hoped, my arrow shattered on the rocks a few feet from his head. Splinters skittered harmlessly across the cavern floor. Python's lamp-like eyes snapped open. I landed in the centre of the room, ankle deep in a bed of old snakeskin. At least I didn't break my legs on impact. I could save that disaster for my big finale. Python studied me, his gaze cutting like headlights through the volcanic fumes. The shimmering haze that surrounded him was snuffed out. Whether he had finished digesting its power, or whether I had interrupted him, I couldn't be sure. I hoped he might roar in frustration. Instead, he laughed, a deep rumble that liquefied my courage. It's unnerving to watch a reptile laugh. Their faces are simply not designed for showing humour. Python didn't smile per se, but he bared his fangs, pulled back his Tootsie Roll segmented lips, and let his forked tongue lash the air, probably savouring the scent of my fear. And here we are. His voice came from all around me, each word a drill bit set against my joints. I have not quite finished digesting Nero's power, but I suppose it will have to do. He tastes like dried rat anyway. I was relieved to hear I'd interrupted Python's emperor tasting. Perhaps this would make him slightly less impossible to defeat. On the other hand, I didn't like how unperturbed he sounded, how utterly confident. Of course, I didn't look like much of a threat. I nocked another arrow. Slither away, snake, while you still can. Python's eyes gleamed with amusement. Amazing. You still haven't learned humility. I wonder how you will taste. Like rat? Like God? They are similar enough, I suppose. He was so wrong. Not about gods tasting like rats. I wouldn't know. But I had learned plenty of humility. So much humility that now, facing my old nemesis, I was racked with self-doubt. I could not do this. What had I been thinking? And yet, along with humility, I'd learned something else. Getting humiliated is only the beginning, not the end. Sometimes you need a second shot, and a third, and a fourth. I fired my arrow. This one hit Python in the face, skittering across his left eyelid and making him blink. He hissed, raising his head until it towered 20 feet above me. Stop embarrassing yourself, Lester. I control Delphi. I would have been content to rule the world through my puppets, the emperors, but you have helpfully cut out the middlemen. I have digested the power of the triumvirate. Now, I will digest. My third shot throat punched him. It didn't pierce the skin. That would have been too much to hope for, but it hit with sufficient force to make him gag. I sidestepped around piles of scales and bones. I jumped a narrow fissure so hot it steam-baked my crotch. I knocked another arrow as Python's form began to change. Rows of tiny leathery wings sprouted from his back. 2 massive legs grew from his belly, lifting him up until he resembled a giant Komodo dragon. I see, he grumbled. Won't go quietly, that's fine. We can make this hurt. He tilted his head, like a dog listening, an image that made me never want to own a dog. Ah, Delphi speaks. Would you like to know your future, Lester? It's very short. Green, luminescent fumes thickened and swirled around him, filling the air with the acrid scent of rot. I watched, too horrified to move, as Python breathed in the spirit of Delphi, twisting and poisoning its ancient power until he spoke in a booming voice, his words carrying the inescapable weight of destiny. Apollo will fall. No! Rage filled my body. My arms steamed. My hands glowed. I fired my fourth arrow and pierced Python's hide just above his new right leg. The monster stumbled, his concentration broken. Clouds of gas dissipated around him. He hissed in pain, stomping his legs to make sure they still worked. He roared, "Never interrupt a prophecy." Then he barreled towards me like a hungry freight train. I leapt to one side, somersaulting through a pile of carcasses as Python hit a chunk out of the cave floor where I'd been standing. Baseball-sized debris rained down around me. One chunk hit the back of my head and nearly knocked me unconscious. Python struck again. I'd been trying to string another shaft, but he was too fast. I jumped out of the way, landing on my bow and shattering my arrow in the process. The cave was now a whirring factory of snake flesh, conveyor belts, shredder apparatuses, compactors and pistons, all made of Python's writhing body, every component ready to grind me into a pulp. I scrambled to my feet and leapt over a section of the monster's body, narrowly avoiding a newly grown head that snapped at me from Python's side. Given Python's strength and my own frailty, I should have died several times over. The only thing keeping me alive was my small size. Python was a bazooka. I was a housefly. He could easily kill me with one shot, but he had to catch me first. You heard your fate, Python boomed. I could feel the cold presence of his massive head looming above me. Apollo will fall. It's not much, but it's enough. He almost caught me in a coil of flesh, but I hopped out of the snare. My tap-dancing friend Lavinia Asimov would have been proud of my fancy footwork. You cannot escape your destiny, Python gloated. I have spoken, so it must be. This demanded a witty comeback, but I was too busy gasping and wheezing. I leapt onto Python's trunk and used it as a bridge to cross one of the fissures. I thought I was being clever until a random lizard foot sprouted next to me and raked my ankle with its claws. I screamed and stumbled, desperately grasping for any handhold as I slipped off the side of the reptile. I managed to grab a leathery wing, which flapped in protest, trying to shake me off. I got one foot on the rim of the fissure, then somehow hauled myself back to solid ground. Bad news. My bow tumbled into the void. I couldn't stop to mourn. My leg was on fire. My shoe was wet with my own blood. Naturally, those claws would be venomous. I'd probably just reduced my lifespan from a few minutes to a few fewer minutes. I limped towards the cavern wall and squeezed myself into a vertical crack no bigger than a coffin. Oh, why did I have to make that comparison? I'd lost my best weapon. I had arrows but nothing to shoot them with. Whatever fits of godly power I was experiencing, they weren't consistent and they weren't enough. That left me with an out-of-tune ukulele and a rapidly deteriorating human body. I wished my friends were here. I would have given anything for Meg's exploding tomato plants, or Nico's Stygian iron blade, or even a team of fast-running troglodytes to carry me around the cavern and screech insults at the giant tasty reptile. But I was alone. Wait, a faint tingle of hope ran through me. Not quite alone. I fumbled in my quiver and drew out ye olde arrow of Dodona. How doeth we, sirrah? The arrow's voice buzzed in my head. Do a thing great, I wheezed. I gotta fare him right where I want of him. That bad, zounds. Where are you, Apollo? Python roared. I can smell your blood. Hear that, arrow? I wheezed, delirious from exhaustion and the venom coursing through my veins. I forced him to call me Apollo. A great victory, intoned the arrow. 'Twould seem 'tis almost time. What? I asked. Its voice sounded unusually subdued, almost sad. I said nothing. You did too. I did not. We must needs formulate a new plan. I shall go right. Thou shalt go left. Okay, I agreed. Wait, that won't work. You don't have legs. You can't hide, Python bellowed. You are no god. This pronouncement hit me like a bucket of ice water. It didn't carry the weight of prophecy, but it was true nonetheless. At the moment, I wasn't sure what I was. I certainly wasn't my old godly self. I wasn't exactly Lester Papadopoulos either. My flesh steamed. Pulses of light flickered under my skin, like the sun trying to break through storm clouds. When had that started? I was between states, morphing as rapidly as Python himself. I was no god. I would never be the same old Apollo again. But in this moment I had the chance to decide what I would become, even if that new existence only lasted a few seconds. The realization burned away my delirium. I won't hide, I muttered. I won't cower. That's not who I will be. The arrow buzzed uneasily. So, what is thy plan? I grasped my ukulele by the fretboard and held it aloft like a club. I raised the arrow of Dodona in my other hand and burst from my hiding place. Charge! At the time, this seemed like a completely sane course of action. If nothing else, it surprised Python. I imagined that I must have looked like, from his perspective, a taggedy teenaged boy with ripped clothes and cuts and contusions everywhere, limping along with one bloody foot, waving a stick and a four-stringed instrument and screaming like a lunatic. I ran straight at his massive head, which was too high for me to reach. I started smashing my ukulele against his throat. Die! Clang! Die! Twang! Die! Crack! Sploing! On the third strike, my ukulele shattered. Python's flesh convulsed, but rather than dying like a good snake, he wrapped a coil around my waist, almost gently, and raised me to the level of his face. His lamp-like eyes were so large as I was. His fangs glistened. His breath smelled of long decayed flesh. Enough now. His voice turned calm and soothing. His eyes pulsed in sync with my heartbeat. You fought well. You should be proud. Now you can relax. I knew he was doing that old reptile hypnosis trick, paralyzing the small mammal so it would be easier to swallow and digest. And in the back of my mind, some cowardly part of me, Lester, Apollo, was there a difference? Whispered, yes, relaxing would feel really good right now. I had done my best. Surely Zeus would see that and be proud. Maybe he would send down a lightning bolt, blast Python into tiny pieces and save me. As soon as I thought this, I realized how foolish it was. Zeus didn't work that way. He would not save me any more than Nero had saved Meg. I had to let go of that fantasy. I had to save myself. I squirmed and fought. I still had my arms free and my hands full. I stabbed Python's coil with my broken fretboard so forcefully that it ripped his skin and stuck in his flesh like a massive splinter, green blood oozing from the wound. He hissed, squeezing me tighter, pushing all the blood into my head until I feared I would blow my top like a cartoon oil well. Has anyone ever told you, Python rasped, that you are annoying? I have, the arrow of Dodona said in a melancholy tone, 1,000 times. I couldn't respond. I had no breath. It took all my remaining strength to keep my body from imploding under the pressure of Python's grip. Well, Python sighed, his breath washing over me like the wind from a battlefield. No matter. We have reached the end. You and I. He squeezed harder, and my ribs began to crack. Chapter 34. Found my shot. Took it. Forgot I was tied to it. Down I go. Bye-bye. I fought. I squirmed. I pounded on Python's skin with my tiny fist, then wriggled my ukulele thorn back and forth in the wound, hoping to make him so miserable he would drop me. Instead, his giant glowing eyes simply watched, calm and satisfied. As my bones developed stress fractures, I could hear in my inner ear. I was a submarine in the Mariana Trench. My rivets were popping. Diest thou not? The arrow of Dodona implored me. The time has come. What? I tried to wheeze out a question, but I had too little air in my lungs. The prophecy which Python spake, said the arrow. If thou must fall, then so you shall. But first, useth thou me. The arrow tilted in my hand, pointing towards Python's enormous face. My thought process was muddled, what with my brain exploding and all, but its meaning jabbed into me like a ukulele fretboard. I can't, I thought. No, thou must. The arrow sounded resigned, determined. I thought about how many miles I had travelled with this small sliver of wood, and how little credence I'd usually given its words. I remembered what it had told me about it being cast out of Dodona, a small expendable branch from the ancient grove, a piece no one would miss. I saw Jason's face. I saw Heloise, Crest, Moneymaker, Don the Fawn, Dakota, all those who had sacrificed themselves to get me here. Now my last companion was ready to pay the cost for my success, to have me do the one thing it had always told me never to do. No, I croaked, possibly the last word I would ever be able to speak. What is that? Python asked, thinking I had spoken to him. Does the little rat beg for mercy at the end? I opened my mouth, unable to answer. The monster's face loomed closer, anxious to savour my last sweet whimpers. Fare thee well, friend, said the arrow. Apollo will fall, but Apollo must rise again. With those last words, conveying all the power of his ancient grove, the arrow closed the reptile's prophecy. Python came within range, and with a sob of despair, I jabbed the arrow of Dodona up to its fletching in his enormous eye. He roared in agony, lashing his head back and forth. His coils loosened just enough for me to wriggle free. I dropped, landing in a heap at the edge of a wide crevice. My chest throbbed. Definitely broken ribs. Probably a broken heart. I had far exceeded the maximum recommended mileage for this Lester Papadopoulos body, but I had to keep going for the arrow of Dodona. I had to keep going if. I struggled to my feet. Python continued flailing, trying to dislodge the arrow from his eye. As a medical god, I could have told him that this would only make the pain worse. Seeing my old Shakespearean missile weapon sticking out of the serpent's head made me sad and furious and defiant. I sensed that the arrow's consciousness was gone. I hoped it had fled back to the grove of Dodona and joined the millions of other whispering voices of the trees, but I feared it was simply no more. Its sacrifice had been real and final. Anger pumped through me. My mortal body steamed in earnest, bursts of light flashing under my skin. Nearby, I spotted Python's tail thrashing. Unlike the snake that had curled around the Leontecephaline, this serpent had a beginning and an end. Behind me yawned the largest of the volcanic crevices. I knew what I had to do. Python! My voice shook the cavern. Stalactites crashed around us. I imagined somewhere far above us, Greek villagers freezing in their tracks as my voice echoed from the ruins of the holy site, olive trees shuddering and losing their fruit. The Lord of Delphi had awoken. Python turned his remaining baleful eye on me. You will not live. I'm fine with that, I said, as long as you die too. I tackled the monster's tail and dragged it towards the chasm. What are you doing? He roared. Stop it, you idiot. With Python's tail in my arms, I leapt over the side. My plan should not have worked. Given my puny mortal weight, I should have simply hung there like an air freshener from a rearview mirror. But I was full of righteous fury. I planted my feet against the rock wall and pulled, dragging Python down as he howled and writhed. He tried to whip his tail around and throw me off, but my feet stayed firmly planted against the side of the chasm wall. My strength grew. My body shone with brilliant light. With one final defiant shout, I pulled my enemy past the point of no return. The bulk of his coil spilled into the crevasse. The prophecy came true. Apollo fell, and Python fell with me. Hesiod once wrote that a bronze anvil would take 9 days to fall from Earth to Tartarus. I suspect he used the word 9 as shorthand for I don't know exactly how long, but it would seem like a long, long time. Hesiod was right. Python and I tumbled into the depths, flipping over one another, bouncing against walls, spinning from total darkness into the red light of lava veins and back again. Given the amount of damage my poor body took, it seems likely that I died somewhere along the way. Yet, I kept fighting. I had nothing left to wield as a weapon, so I used my fists and feet, punching the beast's hide, kicking at every claw, wing, or nascent head that sprouted from his body. I was beyond pain. I was now in the realm of extreme agony. Is the new feeling great? I talked myself in mid-air so that Python took the brunt of our collisions with the walls. We couldn't escape one another. Whenever we drifted apart, some force brought us back together again like marriage bonds. The air pressure became crushing. My eyes bulged. The heat baked me like a batch of Sally Jackson's cookies. But still my body glowed and steamed, the arteries of light now closer to the surface, dividing me into a 3D Apollo jigsaw puzzle. The crevice walls opened around us, and we fell through the cold and gloomy air of Erebos, the realm of Hades. Python tried to sprout wings and fly away, but his pathetic bat appendages couldn't support his weight, especially with me clinging to his back, breaking his wings as soon as they formed. "Stop it!" Python growled. The arrow of Dodona still bristled in his ruined eye. His face oozed green blood from a dozen places where I had kicked and punched him. "I hate you!" Which just goes to show that even arch-enemies of 4,000 years can still find something to agree on. With a great kafroom, we hit water. Or not water, more like a roaring current of bone-chillingly cold grey acid. The river Styx swept us downstream. If you love Category 5 rapids on a river that can drown you, dissolve your skin and corrode your sense of smell or self all at the same time, I highly recommend a giant serpent cruise on the Styx. The river sapped my memories, my emotions, my will. It prized open the burning cracks in my Lester Papadopoulos shell, making me feel raw and unmade like a molting dragonfly. Even Python was not immune. He fought more sluggishly. He flailed and clawed to reach the shore, but I elbowed him in the one good eye, and then kicked him in the gullet, anything to keep him in the water. Now that I wanted to drown. No, I didn't. But I knew Python would be much more dangerous on solid ground. Also, I did not like the idea of showing up on Hades' doorstep in my present condition. I could expect no warm welcome there. I clung to Python's face, using the arrow of Dodona's lifeless shaft like a rudder, steering the monster with tugs of torture. Python wailed and bellowed and thrashed. All around us the Styx rapids seemed to laugh at me. You see, you broke a vow, and now I have you. I held on to my purpose. I remembered Meg McCaffrey's last order. Come back to me, dummy. Her face remained clear in my mind. She had been abandoned so many times, used so cruelly. I would not be another cause of grief for her. I knew who I was. I was her dummy. Python and I tumbled through the grey torrent and then, without warning, shot off the edge of a waterfall. Again we fell into even deeper oblivion. All supernatural rivers eventually empty into Tartarus, the realm where primordial terrors dissolve and reform, where monsters germinate on the continent-sized body of Tartarus himself, slumbering in his eternal dream state. We did not stop long enough for a selfie. We hurtled through the burning air and the spray of the abysmal waterfall as a kaleidoscope of images spun in and out of view. Mountains of black bone like Titan scapulae, fleshy landscapes, dotted with blisters that popped to release glistening newborn dracons and gorgons, plumes of fire and black smoke spewing upward in darkly festive explosions. We fell even further, into the Grand Canyon crevasse of this horror world, to the deepest point of the deepest realm of creation, and then we slammed into solid rock. Wow, Apollo, you marvel. How did you survive? I didn't. By that point I was no longer Lester Papadopoulos. I was not Apollo. I'm not sure who or what I was. I rose to my feet, I don't know how, and found myself on a blade of obsidian, jutting over an endless churning sea of umber and violet. With a combination of horror and fascination, I realized I was standing on the brink of chaos. Below us churned the essence of everything, the great cosmic soup from which all else had spawned, the place where life first began to form and think. Hey, I am separate from the rest of this soup. One step off this ledge and I would rejoin that soup. I would be utterly gone. I examined my arms, which seemed to be in the process of disintegration. The flesh burned away like paper, leaving marbled lines of golden glowing light. I looked like one of those transparent anatomy dolls designed to illustrate the circulatory system. In the centre of my chest, subtler than the best MRI could capture, was a haze of roiling violet energy. My soul? My death? Whatever it was, the glow was getting stronger, the purple tint spreading through my form, reacting to the nearness of chaos, working furiously to unknit the golden lines that held me together. That probably wasn't good. Python lay beside me, his body also crumbling, his size drastically reduced. He was now only 5 times larger than me, like a prehistoric crocodile or constrictor, his shape a mixture of the two, his hide still rippling with half-formed heads, wings and claws. Impaled in his blind left eye, the arrow of Dodona was still perfectly intact, not a bit of fletching out of place. Python rose to his stubby feet. He stomped and howled. His body was coming apart, turning into chunks of reptile and light. And I must say I didn't like the new disco crocodile look. He stumbled towards me, hissing and half blind. Destroy you! I wanted to tell him to chill out. Chaos was way ahead of him. It was rapidly tearing apart our essences. We no longer had to fight. We could just sit on the obsidian spire and quietly crumble together. Python could cuddle up against me, look out over the vast expanse of chaos, mutter, "It's beautiful," and then evaporate into nothingness. But the monster had other plans. He charged, bit me around the waist and barreled forward, intent on pushing me into oblivion. I couldn't stop his momentum. I could only shuffle and twist so that when he hit the edge, Python tumbled over first. I clawed desperately at the rock, grabbing the rim as Python's full weight almost yanked me in half. We hung there, suspended over the void by nothing but my trembling fingers. Python's maw clamped around my waist. I could feel myself being torn in two, but I couldn't let go. I channeled all my remaining strength into my hands, the way I used to do when I played the lyre or the ukulele, when I needed to express a truth so deep it could only be communicated in music. The death of Jason Grace, the trials of Apollo, the love and respect I had for my young friend, Meg McCaffrey. Somehow I managed to bend one leg. I kneed Python in the chin. He grunted. I kneed him again, harder. Python groaned. He tried to say something, but his mouth was full of Apollo. I struck him once more, so hard I felt his lower jaw crack. He lost his grip and fell. He had no final words, just a look of half-blind reptilian horror as he plummeted into chaos and burst into a cloud of purple fizz. I hung from the ledge, too exhausted to feel relief. This was the end. Pulling myself up would be beyond my ability. When I heard a voice that confirmed my worst fears. Chapter 35. Hanging with my peeps. Hanging by my fingertips. It's the same, really. I told you so. I never doubted those would be the last words I heard. Next to me, the goddess Styx floated over the void. Her purple and black dress might have been a plume of chaos itself. Her hair drifted like an ink cloud around her beautiful, angry face. I wasn't surprised that she could exist here, so effortlessly, in a place where other gods feared to go. Along with being the keeper of sacred oaths, Styx was the embodiment of the river of Hati. And, as anyone can tell you, hatred is one of the most durable emotions, one of the last to fade into non-existence. I told you so. Of course she had. Months ago at Camp Half-Blood, I had made a rash oath. I'd sworn on the river Styx not to play music or to use a bow until I was a god again. I'd reneged on both accounts, and the goddess Styx had been dodging and dogging my progress ever since, sprinkling tragedy and destruction wherever I went. Now I was about to pay the final price. I would be cancelled. I waited for Styx to prise my fingers from the obsidian ledge, then give me a raspberry as I plummeted into the soupy, amorphous destruction below. To my surprise, Styx wasn't done talking. "Have you learned?" she asked. If I hadn't felt so weak, I might have laughed. I had learned all right. I was still learning. At that moment, I realised I'd been thinking about Styx the wrong way all these months. She hadn't put destruction in my path. I'd caused it myself. She hadn't got me into trouble. I was the trouble. She had merely called out my recklessness. "Yes," I said miserably. "Too late, but I get it now." I expected no mercy. Certainly I expected no help. My little finger slipped free of the ledge. 9 more until I fell. Styx's dark eyes studied me. Her expression was not gloating, exactly. She looked more like a satisfied piano teacher whose 6-year-old pupil had finally mastered Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. "Hold on to that then," she said. "What, the rock?" I murmured. "Or the lesson?" Styx made a sound that did not belong at the brink of chaos. She chuckled with genuine amusement. "I suppose you'll have to decide." With that, she dissolved into smoke, which drifted upward towards the airy climes of Erebos. I wished I could fly like that, but alas, even here at the precipice of non-existence, I was subject to gravity. At least I had vanquished Python. He would never rise again. I could die knowing that my friends were safe, the oracles were restored, the future was still open for business. So what if Apollo was erased from existence? Maybe Aphrodite was right. 11 Olympians was plenty. Hephaestus could pitch this as a reality TV show. 11 is enough. His streaming service subscriptions would go through the roof. Why couldn't I let go then? I kept clinging to the edge with stubborn determination. My wayward pinky found its grip again. I had promised Meg I would return to her. I hadn't sworn it as an oath, but that didn't matter. If I said I would do it, I had to follow through. Perhaps that was what Styx had been trying to teach me. It wasn't about how loudly you swore your oath or what sacred words you used. It was about whether or not you meant it and whether your promise was worth making. Hold on, I told myself, to both the rock and the lesson. My arms seemed to become more substantial. My body felt more real. The lines of light wove together until my form was a mesh of solid gold. Was it just a last hopeful hallucination, or did I actually pull myself up? My first surprise. I woke. People who have been dissolved into chaos typically don't do that. Second surprise. My sister Artemis was leaning over me, her smile as bright as the harvest moon. "Took you long enough," she said. I rose with a sob and hugged her tight. All my pain was gone. I felt perfect. I almost thought, like myself again. But I wasn't sure what that meant anymore. I was a god again. For so long, my deepest desire had been to be restored. But instead of feeling elated, I wept on my sister's shoulder. I felt like if I let go of Artemis, I would fall back into chaos. Huge parts of my identity would shake loose, and I would never be able to find all the puzzle pieces. "Whoa there." She patted my back awkwardly. "Okay, little fella. You're all right now. You made it." She gently extricated herself from my arms. Not a cuddler, my sister, but she did allow me to hold her hands. Her stillness helped me stop trembling. We were sitting together in a Greek-style sofa bed, in a white marble chamber with a columned terrace that opened onto a view of Olympus, the sprawling mountain-top city of the gods, high above Manhattan. The scent of jasmine and honeysuckle wafted in from the gardens. I heard the heavenly singing of the 9 muses in the distance, probably their daily lunchtime concert in the Agora. I really was back. I examined myself. I wore nothing but a bedsheet from the waist down. My chest was bronze and perfectly sculpted. My muscular arms bore no scars or fiery lines glowing beneath the surface. I was gorgeous, which made me feel melancholy. I had worked hard for those scars and bruises, all the suffering my friends and I had been through. My sister's words suddenly sank in. "Took you long enough." I choked on despair. How long? Artemis's silver eyes scanned my face, as if trying to determine what damage my time as a human had done to my mind. "What do you mean?" I knew immortals could not have panic attacks, yet my chest constricted. The ichor in my heart pumped much too fast. I had no idea how long it had taken me to become a god again. I'd lost half a year from the time Zeus sapped me at the Parthenon to the time I plummeted to Manhattan as a mortal. For all I knew, my restorative siesta had taken years, decades, centuries. Everyone I'd known on earth might be dead. I could not bear that. How long was I out? What century is this? Artemis processed this question. Knowing her as well as I did, I gathered she was tempted to laugh, but hearing the degree of hurt in my voice, she kindly thought better of it. Not to worry, brother, she said. Since you fought Python, only 2 weeks have passed. Boreas, the north wind, could not have exhaled more powerfully than I did. I sat upright, throwing aside my sheet. But what about my friends? They'll think I'm dead. Artemis studiously regarded the ceiling. Not to worry. I, sent them clear omens of your success. They know you have ascended to Olympus again. Now please, put on some clothing. I'm your sister, but I would not wish this sight on anyone. I knew very well she was just teasing me. Godly bodies are expressions of perfection. That's why we appear naked in ancient sanctuary, because you simply do not cover up such flawlessness with clothing. Nevertheless, her comment resonated with me. I felt awkward and uncomfortable in this form, as if I'd been given a Rolls Royce to drive, but no car insurance to go with it. I'd felt so much more comfortable in my economy compact Leicester. Yes. I gazed around the room. Is there a closet or a... Her laughter finally escaped. A closet. That's adorable. You can just wish yourself into clothes, little brother. I knew she was right, but I felt so flustered, I even ignored her little brother comment. It had been too long since I'd relied on my divine power. I feared I might try and fail. I might accidentally turn myself into a camel. Oh, fine, Artemis said. Allow me. A wave of her hand, and suddenly I was wearing a knee-length silver dress, the kind my sister's followers wore, complete with thigh-lace sandals. I suspected I was also wearing a tiara. Perhaps something less huntery? I think you look lovely. Her mouth twitched at the corner. But very well. A flash of silver light, and I was dressed in a man's white chiton. Come to think of it, that piece of clothing was pretty much identical to a hunter's gown. The sandals were the same. I seemed to be wearing a crown of laurels instead of a tiara. But those weren't very different, either. Conventions of gender were strange, but I decided that was a mystery for another time. Thank you, I said. She nodded. The others are waiting in the throne room. Are you ready? I shivered, though it should not have been possible for me to feel cold. The others. I remembered my dream of the throne room, the other Olympians gambling on my success or failure. I wondered how much money they'd lost. What could I possibly say to them? I no longer felt like one of them. I wasn't one of them. In a moment, I told my sister. Would you mind? She seemed to understand. I'll let you compose yourself. I'll tell them you'll be right in. She kissed me lightly on the cheek. I am glad you're back. I hope I won't regret saying that. Me too, I agreed. She shimmered and vanished. I took off the laurel wreath. I did not feel comfortable wearing such a symbol of victory. I ran my finger across the gilded leaves, thinking of Daphne, whom I had treated so horribly. Whether Aphrodite had cursed me or not, it was still my fault that the blameless Naiad had turned herself into a laurel tree just to escape me. I walked to the balcony. I set the wreath on the edge of the railing, and then ran my hand across the hyacinth that grew along the lattice, another reminder of tragic love. My poor Hyacinthus. Had I really created these flowers to commemorate him, or just to wallow in my own grief and guilt? I found myself questioning many things I had done over the centuries. Strangely enough, this uneasiness felt somewhat reassuring. I studied my smooth tan arms, wishing again that I had retained a few scars. Lester Papadopoulos had earned his cuts, bruises, broken ribs, blistered feet, acne. Well, perhaps not the acne. No one deserves that. But the rest had felt more like symbols of victory than laurels, and better commemorations of loss than hyacinths. I had no great desire to be here in Olympus, my home that was not a home. I wanted to see Meg again. I wanted to sit by the fire at Camp Half-Blood and sing ridiculous songs or joke with the Roman demigods in the Camp Jupiter mess hall while platters of food flew over our heads and ghosts in glowing purple togas regaled us with the tales of their former exploits. But the world of demigods wasn't my place. I had been privileged to experience it, and I needed to remember it. That didn't mean I couldn't go back to visit, though. But first I had to show myself to my family, such as they were. The gods awaited. I turned and strode out of my room, trying to recall how the god Apollo walked. Chapter 36. Hooray, yippee, yay! Apollo is in the house. Hold your applause, please. Why so big? I'd never really thought about it before, but after 6 months away, the Olympian's throne room struck me as ridiculously huge. The interior could have housed an aircraft carrier. The great domed ceiling, spangled with constellations, could have nested all the largest cupolas ever created by humans. The roaring central hearth was just the right size for rotisserie cooking a pickup truck. And of course, the thrones themselves were each the size of a siege tower, designed for beings that were 20 feet tall. As I hesitated on the threshold, awestruck by the massiveness of it all, I realised I was answering my own question. The point of going big was to make our occasional guests feel small. We didn't often allow lesser beings to visit us, but when we did, we enjoyed the way their jaws dropped and how they had to crane their necks to see us properly. If we then chose to come down from our thrones and shrink to mortal size, so we could pull these visitors aside and have a confidential chat, or give them a pat on the back, it seemed like we were doing something really special for them, descending to their level. There was no reason the thrones couldn't have been human size, but then we would have seemed too human, and we didn't like being reminded of the resemblance. Or 40 feet tall, but that would have been too awkward, too much shouting to make ourselves heard. We'd need magnifying glasses to see our visitors. We could have been even made the thrones 6 inches tall. Personally, I would have loved to see that. A demigod hero straggles into our presence after some horrible quest, takes a knee before an assembly of miniature gods, and Zeus squeaks in a Mickey Mouse voice, "Welcome to Olympus!" As I thought all this, it dawned on me that the gods' conversations had stopped. They had all turned to look at me standing in the doorway. The entire squad was here today, which only happened on special occasions. The solstice, Saturnalia, the World Cup. I had a moment's panic. Did I even know how to turn 20 feet tall anymore? Would they have to summon a booster seat for me? I caught Artemis's eye. She nodded, either a message of encouragement or a warning that if I didn't hurry up and enchant myself, she would help by turning me into a 20-foot tall camel in an evening gown. That gave me just the shot of confidence I needed. I strode into the room. To my great relief, my stature grew with every step, just the right size. I took my old throne directly across the hearth from my sister, with Ares on my right and Hephaestus on my left. I met the eyes of each god in turn. You have heard of imposter syndrome. Everything in me screamed I'm fake. I do not belong here. Even after 4,000 years of godhood, 6 months of mortal life had convinced me that I wasn't a true deity. Surely these 11 Olympians would soon realise this unfortunate fact. Zeus would yell, "What have you done with the real Apollo?" Hephaestus would press a button on his gadget-encrusted chair. A trapdoor would open in the seat of my throne, and I would be flushed unceremoniously back to Manhattan. Instead, Zeus simply studied me, his eyes stormy under his bushy black eyebrows. He'd chosen to dress traditionally today in a flowing white caton, which was not a good look for him, given the way he liked to manspread. "You have returned," he noted, supreme lord of stating the obvious. "Yes, father." I wondered if the word father sounded as bad as it tasted. I tried to control the bile rising inside me. I mustered a smile and scanned the other gods. So, who won the betting pool? Next to me, Hephaestus at least had the good manners to shift uncomfortably in his seat, though of course he was always uncomfortable. Athena shot a withering look at Hermes as if to say, "I told you that was a bad idea." "Hey man," Hermes said, "that was just something to keep our nerves under control. We were worried about you." Ares snorted, "Especially because of the way you were fumbling along down there. I'm surprised you lasted as long as you did." His face turned red, as if he just realised he was speaking aloud. Good job, man. You came through." "So, you lost a bundle," I summed up. Ares cursed under his breath. Athena won the pot. Hermes rubbed his back pocket, as if his wallet was still hurting. "Really?" I asked. Athena shrugged. "Wisdom. It comes in handy." It should have been a commercial. The camera zooms in on Athena, who smiles at the screen as the promotional slogan appears below her. "Wisdom. It comes in handy." So, I spread my hands, signalling that I was ready to hear whatever compliments, insults, constructive criticism. I had no idea what was on the agenda for this meeting, and I found I didn't care much. On the other side of the room, Dionysus drummed his fingers on his leopard skin patterned armrests. Being the only god on the goddess side of the assembly, long story. He and I often had staring contests or traded eye rolls when our father got too long-winded. Dionysus was still in his slovenly Mr. D guise, which annoyed Aphrodite, who sat next to him. I could tell from her body language that she wanted to squirm out of her Oscar de la Renta midi. Given Dionysus's exile at Camp Half-Blood, he was rarely allowed to visit Olympus. When he did, he was usually careful not to speak unless spoken to. Today, he surprised me. "Well, I think you did a marvellous job," he offered. "I think, in your honour, any god who is currently being punished with a stint on Earth ought to be pardoned immediately." "No," Zeus snapped. Dionysus slumped back with a dejected sigh. I couldn't blame him for trying. His punishment, like mine, seemed completely senseless and disproportionate, but Zeus worked in mysterious ways. He couldn't always know his plan. That was probably because he didn't have a plan. Demeter had been weaving wheat stalks into a new drought-resistant variety, as she often did while listening to our deliberations. But now she set aside her basket. I agree with Dionysus. Apollo should be commended. Her smile was warm, her golden hair rippled in an unseen breeze. I tried to spot any resemblance to her daughter Meg, but they were as different as a kernel and a husk. I decided I preferred the husk. He made a wonderful slave to my daughter, Demeter continued. True, it took him a while to adjust, but I can forgive that. If any of you need a slave in the future for your demigod children, I recommend Apollo without hesitation. I hope this was a joke, but Demeter, like the growing season, was not known for her sense of humour. Thanks, I said. She blew me a kiss. Gods, Meg, I thought, I am so sorry your mum is your mum. Queen Hera lifted her veil. As I'd seen in my dream, her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but when she spoke, her tone was as hard as bronze. She glared at her husband. At least Apollo did something. Not this again, Zeus rumbled. I didn't kill him, woman. Oh, my chosen, Hera said. Jason Grace, your son. And you. I didn't kill him. That was Caligula. Yes, Hera snapped. And at least Apollo grieved. At least he got vengeance. Wait, what was happening? Was my wicked stepmother defending me? Much to my shock, when Hera met my eyes, her gaze wasn't hostile. She seemed to be looking for solidarity, sympathy, even, you see, what I have to deal with. Your father is horrible. In that moment, I felt a twinge of compassion for my stepmother for the first time in, ever. Don't get me wrong, I still disliked her. But it occurred to me that being Hera might not be so easy, given who she was married to. In her place, I might have become a bit of an impossible meddler too. Whatever the case, Zeus grumbled, it does appear that after 2 weeks, Apollo's fix is permanent. Python is truly gone. The oracles are free. The fates are once again able to spin their thread without encumbrance. These words settled over me like Vesuvian ashes. The fates, Fred. How had I not considered this before? The 3 eternal sisters used their loom to spin the lifespans of both gods and mortals. They snipped the cord of destiny whenever it was time for someone to die. They were higher and greater than any oracle, greater even than the Olympians. Apparently, Python's poison had done more than simply strangle prophecies. If he could interfere with the fates weaving as well, the reptile could have ended or prolonged lives as he saw fit. The implications were horrifying. Something else struck me about Zeus's statement. He had said it appeared my fix was permanent. That implied Zeus wasn't sure. I suspected that when I fell to the edge of chaos, Zeus had not been able to watch. There were limits to even his far sight. He did not know exactly what had happened, how I had defeated Python, how I had come back from the brink. I caught a look from Athena, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes, father, I said. Python is gone. The oracles are free. I hope that meets with your approval. Having spent time in Death Valley, I was confident that my tone was much drier. Zeus stroked his beard as if pondering for future's endless possibilities. Poseidon stifled a yawn as if pondering how soon this meeting would end so he could get back to fly fishing. I am satisfied, Zeus pronounced. The gods let out a collective sigh. As much as we pretended to be a council of 12, in truth we were a tyranny. Zeus was less a benevolent father and more an iron-fisted leader, with the biggest weapons and the ability to strip us of our immortality if we offended him. Somehow, though, I didn't feel relieved to be off Zeus's hook. In fact, I had to stop myself from rolling my eyes. Super, I said. Yes, Zeus agreed. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Welcome back to godhood, my son. All has gone according to my plan. You have done admirably. You are forgiven and restored to your throne. There followed a smattering of polite applause from the other deities. Artemis was the only one who looked genuinely happy. She even winked at me. Wow, it truly was a day for miracles. What's the first thing you'll do now that you're back? Hermes asked. Smite some mortals? Maybe drive your sun chariot too close to the earth and smoke the place. Ooh, can I come? Ares asked. I gave them a guarded shrug. I think I may just visit some old friends. Dionysus nodded wistfully. The 9 muses, excellent choice. But those weren't the friends I had in mind. Well then, Zeus scanned the room, in case any of us wanted one last chance to grovel at his feet. Council is dismissed. The Olympians popped out of existence one after the other, back to whatever godly mischief they'd been managing. Artemis gave me a reassuring nod, and then dissolved into silvery light. That left only Zeus and me. My father coughed into his fist. I know you think your punishment was harsh, Apollo. I did not answer. I tried my best to keep my expression polite and neutral. But you must understand, Zeus continued. Only you could have overthrown Python. Only you could have freed the oracles. And you did it as I expected. The suffering, the pain along the way, regrettable but necessary. You have done me proud. Interesting how he put that. I had done him proud. I had been useful in making him look good. My heart did not melt. I did not feel that this was a warm and fuzzy reconciliation with my father. Let's be honest, some fathers don't deserve that. Some aren't capable of it. I suppose I could have raged at him and called him bad names. We were alone. He probably expected it. Given his awkward self-consciousness at the moment, he might even have let me get away with it unpunished. But it would not have changed him. It would not have made anything different between us. You cannot change a tyrant by trying to out-ugly him. Meg could never have changed Nero any more than I could change Zeus. I could only try to be different from him, better, more human, and to limit the time I spent around him to as little as possible. I nodded. I understand, Father. Zeus seemed to understand that what I understood was not perhaps the same thing he understood, but he accepted the gesture, I suppose because he had little choice. Very well. So, welcome home. I rose from my throne. Thank you. Now, if you'll excuse me. I dissolved into golden light. There were several other places I'd rather be, and I intended to visit them all. Chapter 37. Burnt Marshmallow Bliss. Pinochle and Strawberries. Love you, Camp Half-Blood. As a god, I could split myself into multiple parts. I could exist in many different places at once. Because of this, I can't tell you with absolute certainty which of the following encounters came first. Read them in any order you like. I was determined to see all my friends again, no matter where they were, and give them equal attention at roughly the same time. First, though, I must mention my horses. No judgment, please. I had missed them. Because they were immortal, they did not need sustenance to survive. Nor did they absolutely have to make their daily journey through the sky in order to keep the sun going, thanks to all the other solar gods out there, still powering the movements of the cosmos and that other thing called astrophysics. Still, I worried that my horses hadn't been fed or taken out for exercise in at least 6 months, perhaps a whole year, which tended to make them grumpy. For reasons I shouldn't have to explain, you don't want your sun being pulled across the sky by grumpy horses. I materialised at the entrance of the Sun Palace and found that my valets had abandoned their posts. This happens when you don't pay them their gold drachma every day. I could barely push open the front door because months of mail had been shoved through the slot. Bills, ad circulars, credit card offers, appeals for charities like Godwill and Dryads Without Borders. I suppose Hermes found it amusing to deliver me so much snail mail. I would have to have a talk with that guy. I also hadn't put a stop to my automatic deliveries from the Amazons, so the portico was piled high with shipping boxes filled with toothpaste, laundry detergent, guitar strings, reams of blank tablature, and coconut-scented suntan lotion. Inside, the palace had reverted to its old Helios smell, as it did every time I was gone for an extended period. Its former owner had baked the place with a scent of Titan, pungent and saccharine, slightly reminiscent of Axe body spray. I'd have to open some windows and burn some sage. A layer of dust had accumulated on my golden throne. Some jokers had written "Wash me" on the back of the chair. Stupid venti, probably. In the stables, my horses were glad to see me. They kicked at their stalls, blew fire, and whinnied indignantly, as if to say, "Where the Hades have you been?" I fed them their favourite gilded straw, then filled their nectar trough. I gave them each a good brushing and whispered sweet nothings in their ears until they stopped kicking me in the groin, which I took as a sign that they forgave me. It felt good to do something so routine, something I'd done millions of times before. Taking care of horses, I mean, not getting kicked in the groin. I still didn't feel like my old self. I didn't really want to feel like my old self, but being in my stables felt much more comfortable and familiar than being on Olympus. I split myself into separate Apollos and sent one of me on my daily ride across the sky. I was determined to give the world a regular day, to show everyone that I was back at the reins and feeling good. No solar flares, no droughts or wildfires today, just Apollo being Apollo. I hoped that this part of me would serve as my steady rudder, my grounding force while I visited my other stops. The welcome I received at Camp Half-Blood was uproarious and beautiful. "Lester," the camps chanted. "Lester! Lester! Lester!" I had chosen to appear in my old Papadopoulos form. Why not my glowing perfect god bod, or one of the Bang Tang Boys, or Paul McCartney circa 1965? After complaining for so many months about my flabby, acne-spotted Lester meat sack, I now found that I felt at home in that form. When I'd first met Meg, she had assured me that Lester's appearance was perfectly normal. At the time, the notion had horrified me. Now I found it reassuring. "Hello," I cried, accepting group hugs that threatened to deteriorate into stampedes. "Yes, it's me. Yep, I made it back to Olympus." Only 2 weeks had passed, but the newbie campers had seemed so young and awkward when I first arrived, and they now carried themselves like demigod veterans. Going through a major battle. Sorry, field trip. We'll do that to you. Chiron looked enormously proud of his trainees, and of me, as if I were one of them. "You did well, Apollo," he said, gripping my shoulder like the affectionate father I'd never had. You are always welcome here at camp. Ugly weeping would not have been appropriate for a major Olympian god, so that's exactly what I did. Kayla, Austin, and I hugged each other and wept some more. I had to keep my godly powers firmly under control, or my joy and relief might have exploded in a firestorm of happiness and obliterated the whole valley. I asked about Meg, but they told me she had already left. She'd gone back to Palm Springs, to her father's old home of Lugaselwa and her foster siblings from Nero's imperial household. The idea of Meg handling that volatile group of demigods with only the help of Lou Beard the pirate made me uneasy. Is she well? I asked Austin. He hesitated. Yeah, his eyes were haunted, as if remembering the many things we'd all seen and done in Nero's tower. You know, she will be. I set aside my worries for the moment and continued making rounds among my friends. If they felt nervous that I was in a god again, they hid it well. As for me, I made a conscious effort to stay cool, not to grow 20 feet tall or burst into golden flames every time I saw someone I liked. I found Dionysus sitting glumly on the porch of the big house, sipping a Diet Coke. I sat down across from him at the pinochle table. Well, he said with a sigh, it appears some of us do get happy endings. I think he was pleased for me, in his own way. At least he tried to tamp down the bitterness in his voice. I couldn't blame him for feeling salty. My punishment was over, yet his continued. 100 years compared to my 6 months. To be honest, though, I could no longer consider my time on Earth to have been a punishment. Terrible, tragic, nearly impossible, yes, but calling it a punishment gave Zeus too much credit. It had been a journey, an important one I made myself, with the help of my friends. I hoped. I believed that the grief and pain that shaped me into a better person had forged a more perfect Leicester from the dregs of Apollo. I would not trade these experiences for anything. And if I had been told I had to be Leicester for another 100 years, well, I could think of worse things. At least I wouldn't be expected to show up at the Olympian solstice meetings. You will have your happy ending, brother, I told Dionysus. He studied me. You speak as the god of prophecy? No, I smiled, just as someone with faith. Surely not faith in our father's wisdom. I laughed. Faith in our ability to write our own stories, regardless of what the fates throw at us. Faith that you will find a way to make wine out of your sour grapes. How deep, Dionysus muttered, though I detected a faint smile at the corners of his mouth. He gestured to his game table. Pinochle, perhaps, and that. At least, I know I can dominate you. I stayed with him that afternoon, and he won 6 games. He only cheated a little. Before dinner, I teleported to the Grove of Dodona, deep within the camp's forest. Just as before, the ancient trees whispered in a cacophony of voices, snatches of riddles and songs, bits of doggerel, some of it actually about dogs, recipes and weather reports, none of it making much sense. Brass wind chimes twisted in the branches, reflecting the evening light and catching every breeze. Hello, I called. I came to thank you. The trees continued to whisper, ignoring my presence. You gave me the arrow of Dodona as my guide, I continued. I detected a tittering of laughter among the trees. Without the arrow, I said, my quest would have failed. It sacrificed itself to defeat Python. Truly, it was the greatest in all the grove. If the trees could make a screechy rewind noise, I'm sure they would have. Their whispering died away. The brass chimes hung lifeless in the branches. Its wisdom was invaluable, I said. Its sacrifice noble. It represented you with honour. I will certainly tell this grove's guardian, my grandmother Rhea, all about its great service. She will hear what you did, that when I needed aid, you sent your best. The trees began whispering again, more nervously this time. Wait, we didn't. What? I teleported away before they could see me smile. I hoped that, wherever its spirit was, my friend the arrow was having a laugh worthy of a Shakespearean comedy. That night, after the campfire, I sat watching the embers burn down with Nico, Will and Rachel. The boys sat comfortably next to each other, Will's arm around Nico's shoulder, as the son of Hades twirled a burnt marshmallow on a stick. Next to me, Rachel hugged her knees and stared contentedly at the stars, the dying fire reflecting in her red hair like a charging herd of Tauri Sylvestras. Everything's working again, she told me, tapping the side of her head. The visions are clear. I can paint. I've issued a couple of prophecies already. No more snake poison in my mind. Thank you. I'm glad, I said. And your parents' destroyed house? She laughed. Turned out to be a good thing. Before my dad had wanted me to stay around here in the fall. Now he says maybe it's a good idea if I do what I wanted to begin with. Gonna take a gap year in Paris to study art while they rebuild the house. Oh, Paris, Will said. Rachel grinned. Right. But don't worry. I'll be back here next summer to dish out more ocular awesomeness. And if we need you in the meantime, Nico said, there's always shadow travel. Will laughed. I'd love to think you're suggesting a date night in Paris, Mr. Dark Lord, but you're still thinking about Tartarus, aren't you? Hoping for some prophetic guidance. Nico shrugged. Unfinished business. I frowned. It seemed like so long ago they had mentioned this to me. Nico's compulsion to explore the depths of Tartarus, the voice he had heard, calling for help. I didn't want to open fresh wounds, but I asked as gently as I could. You're sure it's not Jason? Nico picked at his blackened marshmallow. I won't lie. I've wondered about that. I've thought about trying to find Jason, but no, this isn't about him. He snuggled a little closer to Will. I have a sense that Jason made his choice. I wouldn't be honouring his sacrifice if I tried to undo it. With Hazel, she was just drifting in Asphodel. I could tell she wasn't supposed to be there. She needed to come back. With Jason, I have a feeling he's somewhere better now. Like Elysium, I wondered. Rebirth? I was hoping you could tell me, Nico admitted. I shook my head. I'm afraid I'm clueless about after-death matters. But if it's not Jason you're thinking about. Nico twirled his s'more stick. When I was in Tartarus the first time, somebody helped me, and we left him down there. I can't stop thinking about him. Should I be jealous? Will asked. He's a titan, dummy, Nico said. I sat up straight. A titan? Long story, Nico said, but he's not a bad guy. Well, I feel like I should look for him, see if I can figure out what happened. He might need my help. I don't like it when people are overlooked. Rachel bunched up her shoulders. Hades wouldn't mind you traipsing down to Tartarus? Nico laughed without humour. He's expressly forbidden it. After that business with the doors of death, he doesn't want anybody in Tartarus ever again. That's where the troglodytes come in. They can tunnel anywhere, even there. They can get us in and out safely. Safely being a relative term, Will noted, given that the whole idea is bonkers. I frowned. I still didn't like the idea of my sunshiny son skipping off into the land of monster nightmares. My recent tumble to the edge of chaos had reminded me what a terrible travel destination it was. Then again, it wasn't my place to tell demigods what to do, especially those I loved the most. I didn't want to be that kind of god anymore. I wish I could offer you help, I said, but I'm afraid Tartarus is outside of my jurisdiction. It's okay, Dad, Will said. You're done with your part. No story ever ends, does it? It just leads into others. He laced his fingers through Nico's. We'll handle whatever comes next, together, with or without a prophecy. I swear I had nothing to do with it. I did not press a button on Rachel's back. I did not prearrange a surprise gift from Delphic Deliveries. But as soon as Will said the word prophecy, Rachel went rigid. She inhaled sharply. A green mist rose from the earth, swirling around her and coiling into her lungs. She tipped over sideways while Nico and Will lunged to catch her. As for me, I scrambled away in a very ungodlike manner, my heart beating like a frightened Leicester. I guess all that green gas reminded me too much of my recent quality time with Python. By the time my panic subsided, a prophetic moment had passed. The gas had dissipated. Rachel lay comfortable on the ground. Will and Nico both standing over her with perturbed looks. Did you hear it? Nico asked me. The prophecy she whispered. I didn't, I admitted. Probably better if I let you two figure this one out. Will nodded, resigned. Well, it didn't sound good. No, I'm sure it didn't. I looked down fondly at Rachel Dare. She's a wonderful oracle. Chapter 38. Carrots and muffins. Sally's fresh-baked blue cookies. I am so hungry. The way station felt so different in the summer. Emmy's rooftop garden was bursting at the seams with tomatoes, peas, cabbage and watermelon. The great hall was bursting at the seams with old friends. The hunters of Artemis were in residence, having taken quite a beating on their most recent excursion to catch the Temusian fox. That fox is murder, said Reina Avila Ramirez Arellano, rubbing her bruised neck. Let us right into a den of werewolves, the little punk. Ugh, agreed Thalia Grace, pulling a werewolf tooth out of her leather cuirass. TF spreads destruction everywhere he goes. TF? I asked. Easier than saying Temisian fox 20 times a day. Thalia told me. Anyway, the fox runs through a town and stirs up every monster within 20 miles. Paria is pretty much in ruins. This sounded like a tragic loss, but I was more concerned with my hunter buddies. Are you regretting your decision to join up? I asked Raina. She grinned. Not for a minute. This is fun. Thalia punched her in the shoulder. Great hunter, this one. I knew she would be. We'll get that fox one of these days. Emmy called to them from the kitchen to help with dinner, because the carrots weren't going to dice themselves. The two friends strode off together, laughing and sharing stories. It did my heart good to see them so happy, even if their version of fun was a never-ending fox hunt that destroyed large portions of the Midwest. Joe was teaching Georgina, their daughter, and possibly mine too, to forge weapons in the smithy. When Georgina saw me, she looked unexcited, as if we'd just parted a few minutes ago. You keep my doll? She demanded. I could have lied. I could have magically produced an exact likeness of the pipe cleaner figure and said, of course. But the truth was that I had no idea where the little guy had ended up. Perhaps in Delphi or Tartarus or Chaos. I told her the truth. Would you make me another one? Georgina thought about this. Nah. Then she went back to quenching hot blades with her mum. The swordsman, Letiris, seemed to be adjusting well. He was overseeing an elephant visitation program with Waystation resident Livia and Hannibal from Camp Jupiter. The two pachyderms were romping around together in the back lot, flirting by throwing medicine balls at each other. After dinner, I got to visit with Leo Valdez, who had just struggled back home after a full day of community service. He was teaching homeless kids shop skills at a local shelter. That's amazing, I said. He grinned, biting off a chunk of Emmy's fresh-made buttermilk scones. Yeah, bunch of kids like me, you know. They never had much. Least I can show them somebody cares. Plus, some of them are excellent mechanics. Don't you need tools? I asked. A shop? Festus, Leo said. A bronze dragon makes the best mobile shop. Most of the kids just see him as a truck with the mist and all. But a few of them, they know what's up. Jo passed by on her way to the Griffin lofts and patted him on the shoulder. Doing good, this one. He's got potential. Thanks, Mum, Leo said. Jo scoffed, but she looked pleased. And Calypso? I asked Leo. A flurry of emotions passed across his face, enough to tell me that Leo was more lovesick than ever over the former goddess, and things were still complicated. Yeah, she's good, he said at last. I've never seen anyone actually like high school before, but the routine, the homework, the people, she ate it up. I guess it's just so different from being stuck on a Gia. I nodded, though the idea of an ex-immortal liking high school didn't make much sense to me either. Where is she now? Band camp? I stared. Excuse me? She's a counsellor at band camp, Leo said. Like, for regular mortal kids who are practising music and stuff. I don't know, she's gone all summer. He shook his head, clearly worried. Clearly missing her, perhaps having nightmares about all the hot clarinet player counsellors Calypso might be hanging around with. It's all good, he said, forcing a smile. You know, a little time apart to think. We'll make it work. Raina passed by and heard the last part. Talking about Calypso. Yeah, I had to have a heart-to-heart with mi hermano here. She squeezed Leo's shoulder. You don't call a young lady mamacita. You got to have more respect. Entiendes? Leo looked ready to protest, and then seemed to think better about it. Yeah, okay. Raina smiled at me. Valdez grew up without his mum. Never learned these things. Now he's got two great foster mums and a big sister who isn't afraid to smack him when he gets out of line. She flicked a finger playfully against his cheek. Ain't that the truth? Leo muttered. Cheer up, Raina said. Calypso will come around. You're a doofus sometimes, Valdez, but you've got a heart of imperial gold. Next stop, Camp Jupiter. It did not surprise me that Hazel and Frank had become the most efficient and respected pair of praetors ever to run the 12th Legion. In record time, they had inspired a rebuilding effort in New Rome, repaired all the damage from our battle against Tarquin and the two emperors, and started a recruitment drive with Lupa's wolves to bring in new demigods from the wild. At least 20 had arrived since I left, which made me wonder where they'd all been hiding, and how busy my fellow gods must have been in the last few decades to have so many children. We're going to install more barracks over there, Hazel told me, as she and Frank gave me the 5 denarius tour of the repaired camp. We've expanded the thermal baths, and we're constructing a victory arch on the main road into New Rome to commemorate our defeat of the emperors. Her amber eyes flashed with excitement. It's going to be plated with gold, completely over the top. Frank smiled. Yeah, as far as we can tell, Hazel's curse is officially broken. We did an augury at Pluto's shrine, and it came up favourably. She can summon jewels, precious metals, and use them or spend them now without causing any curses. But we're not going to abuse that power, Hazel hastened to add. We'll only use it to improve the camp and honour the gods. We're not going to buy any yachts or private aeroplanes or big golden necklaces with H+F forever, diamond pendants, are we, Frank? Frank pouted. No, I guess not. Hazel ribbed him. No, definitely not, Frank amended. That would be tacky. Frank still lumbered along like a friendly grizzly bear, but his posture seemed more relaxed, his mood more cheerful, as if it was starting to sink in that his destiny was no longer controlled by a small piece of firewood. For Frank Zhang, like the rest of us, the future was open for business. He brightened. Oh, and check this out, Apollo. He swirled his purple praetor's cloak like he was about to turn into a vampire bat, which Frank was fully capable of doing. Instead, the cloak simply turned into an oversized sweater wrap. I figured it out. Hazel rolled her eyes. My sweet, sweet Frank. Could you please not with the sweater wrap? What? Frank protested. It's impenetrable and comfortable. Later that day, I visited my other friends. Lavinia Asimov had made good on her threat, promise, to teach the 5th cohort to tap dance. The unit was now feared and respected in the war games for their ability to form a testudo shield wall while doing the freebeat shuffle. Tyson and Ella were happily back at work in their bookshop. The unicorns were still weaponized. The Jason Grace temple expansion plan was still moving forward, with new shrines being added every week. What did surprise me? Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase had arrived and taken up residence in New Rome, giving them 2 months to adjust to their new environs before the fall semester of their freshman year in college. Architecture, Annabeth said, her grey eyes as bright as her mother's. She said the word architecture as if it were the answer to all the world's problems. I'm going to focus on environmental design at UC Berkeley, while dual enrolling at New Rome University. By year 3, I figure, whoa there, wise girl, Percy said. First you have to help me get through freshman English, and math, and history. Annabeth's smile lit up the empty dorm room. Yeah, seaweed brain, I know. We'll take the basics together, but you will do your own homework. Man, Percy said, looking at me for commiseration. Homework. I was pleased to see them doing so well, but I agreed with him about homework. Gods never got it. We didn't want it. We just assigned it in the form of deadly get quests. And your major? I asked him. Yeah, marine biology? Aquaculture? I don't know. I'll figure it out. You're both staying here. I gestured at the bunk beds. New Rome University may have been a college for demigods, but its dorm rooms were as basic and uninspired as any other universities. No, Annabeth sounded offended. Have you seen the way this guy throws his dirty clothes around? Gross. Besides, dorms are required for all freshmen, and they aren't co-ed. My roommate probably won't arrive until September. Yeah, Percy sighed. Meanwhile, I'll be all the way across campus in this empty boys' dormitory, 2 whole blocks away. Annabeth swatted his arm. Besides, Apollo, our living arrangements are none of your business. I held up my hands in surrender. But you did travel across the country together to get here. With Grover, Percy said. It was great. Just the 3 of us again. But man, that road trip. Kind of went sideways, Annabeth agreed. And up and down and diagonal. But we made it here alive. I nodded. This was, after all, about the most that could be said for any demigod trip. I thought about my own trip from Los Angeles to Camp Jupiter, escorting the coffin of Jason Grace. Percy and Annabeth both seemed to read my thoughts. Despite the happy days ahead of them and the general spirit of optimism at Camp Jupiter, sadness still lingered, hovering and flickering at the corners of my vision like one of the camp's lairs. We found out when we arrived, Percy said. I still can't. His voice caught. He looked down and picked at his palm. I cried myself sick, Annabeth admitted. I wish I'd been there for Piper. I hope she's doing okay. Piper is a tough young lady, I said. But yes, Jason. He was the best of us. No one argued with that. By the way, I said, your mother is doing well, Percy. I just saw her in Paul. Your little sister is entirely too adorable. She never stops laughing. He brightened. I know, right? Estelle is awesome. I just missed my mum's baking. I might be able to help with that. As I had promised Sally Jackson, I teleported a plate of her fresh-baked blue cookies straight into my hands. Dude! Percy stuffed a cookie in his mouth. His eyes rolled up in ecstasy. Apollo, you're the best. I take back almost everything I've said about you. It's quite all right, I assured him. Wait, what do you mean, almost? Chapter 39. 210 is a lot of haiku, but I can do more if... Insert the sound of a god being strangled here. Speaking of Piper McLean, I embarrassed myself when I popped in to visit her. It was a lovely summer night in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. The stars were out by the millions and cicadas chirred in the trees. Heat settled over the rolling hills. Fireflies glowed in the grass. I had willed myself to appear wherever Piper McLean might be. I ended up standing on the flat roof of a modest farmhouse, the McLean ancestral home. At the edge of the roof, 2 people sat shoulder to shoulder, dark silhouettes facing away from me. One leaned over and kissed the other. I didn't mean to, but I was so flustered I flashed like a camera light, inadvertently changing from Lester to my adult Apollo form, toga, blonde hair, muscles and all. The 2 lovebirds turned to face me. Piper McLean was on the left. On the right sat another young lady, with short dark hair and a rhinestone nose stud that winked in the darkness. Piper unlaced her fingers from the other girls. Wow, Apollo. Timing. Sorry, Who's this? The other girl asked, taking in my bedsheet clothing. Your dad has a boyfriend? I suppressed a yelp. Since Piper's dad was Tristan McLean, former A-list heartthrob of Hollywood, I was tempted to say, not yet, but I'm willing to volunteer. I didn't think Piper would appreciate that, though. Old family friend, Piper said. Sorry, Shell. Would you excuse me a sec? Sure. Piper got up, grabbed my arm and guided me to the far end of the roof. Hey, what's up? I had not been this tongue-tied since I'd been a full-time Lester Papadopoulos. I just wanted to check in, make sure you're doing okay. It seems you are. Piper gave me a hint of a smile. Well, early days. You're in a process, I said, remembering what she had told me in California. Suddenly, much of what she and I had talked about started to make sense, not being defined by Aphrodite's expectations, or Hera's ideas of what a perfect couple looked like. Piper finding her own way, not the one people expected of her. Exactly, she said. I'm happy for you. And I was. In fact, it took effort for me not to glow like a giant firefly. Your dad? Yeah, I mean, from Hollywood back to Tahlequah is a big change, but he seems like he's found some peace. We'll see. I heard you got back on Olympus. Congratulations. I wasn't sure if congratulations were in order, given my general restlessness and feelings of unworthiness, but I nodded. I told her what had happened with Nero. I told her about Jason's funeral. She hugged her arms. In the starlight, her face looked as warm as bronze fresh from Hephaestus's anvil. That's good, she said. I'm glad Camp Jupiter did right by him. You did right by him. I don't know about that, I said. She laid her hand on my arm. You haven't forgotten. I can tell. She meant about being human, about honouring the sacrifices that had been made. No, I said. I won't forget. The memory is part of me now. Well then, good. Now, if you'll excuse me. What? She pointed back to her friend Shell. Oh, of course. Take care of yourself, Piper McLean. You too, Apollo. And the next time maybe give me a heads up before popping in. I muttered something apologetic, but she had already turned to go, back to her new friend, her new life, and the stars in the sky. The last and hardest reunion, Meg McCaffrey. A summer day in Palm Springs. The day, blistering heat, reminded me of the burning maze. But there was nothing malicious or magical about it. The desert simply got hot. Ephalus, the former home of Dr. Philip McCaffrey, was an oasis of cool, verdant life. Tree limbs had grown to reshape the once fully man-made structure, making it even more impressive than it had been in Meg's childhood. Annabeth would have been blown away by the local dryad's environmental design. Windows had been replaced by layers of vines that opened and closed automatically for shade and cool, responding to the wind's smallest fluctuations. The greenhouses had been repaired and were now packed with rare specimens of plants from all around Southern California. Natural springs filled the cisterns and provided water for the gardens and a cooling system for the house. I appeared in my old Lester form on the pathway from the house to the gardens and was almost skewered by the melee. Meg's personal troop of 7 super dryads. Halt! They yelled in unison. Intruder! It's just me, I said, which didn't seem to help. Lester! Still nothing. Meg's old, servant? The melee lowered their spear points. Oh, yes, said one. Servant of the Meg, said another. The weak, insufficient one, said a third, before the Meg had our services. I'll have you know I'm a full Olympian god now, I protested. The dryads did not look impressed. We will march you to the Meg, one said. She will pass judgment. Double time. They formed a phalanx around me and herded me up the path. I could have vanished or flown away or done any number of impressive things, but they had surprised me. I fell into my old Lesterish habits and allowed myself to be force-marched to my old master. We found her digging in the dirt alongside her former Nero family members, showing them how to transplant cactus saplings. I spotted Amelia and Lucius, contentedly caring for their baby cacti. Even young Cassius was there, though how Meg had tracked him down I had no idea. He was joking with one of the dryads, looking so relaxed. I couldn't believe he was the same boy who had fled from Nero's tower. Nearby, at the edge of a newly planted peach orchard, the Carpos Peaches stood in all his diapered glory. Oh, sure, he showed up after the danger had passed. He was engaged in a heated conversation with a young female Carpos, whom I'm assumed was a native of the area. She looked much like Peaches himself, except she was covered in a fine layer of spines. Peaches? Peaches told her. Prickly pear, the young lady rejoined. Peaches, prickly pear. That seemed to be the extent of their argument. Perhaps it was about to devolve into a death match for local fruit supremacy, or perhaps it was the beginning of the greatest love story ever to ripen. It was hard to tell with Carpoy. Meg did a double take when she saw me. Her face split in a grin. She wore her pink Sally Jackson dress, topped with a gardening hat that looked like a mushroom cap. Despite the protection, her neck was turning red from the work outdoors. You're back, she noted. I smiled. You're sunburned. Come here, she ordered. Her commands no longer held force, but I went to her anyway. She hugged me tight. She smelled like prickly pear and warm sand. I might have got a little teary-eyed. You guys keep at it, she told her trainees. I'll be back. The former imperial children looked happy to comply. They actually seemed determined to garden, as if their sanity depended on it, which perhaps it did. Meg took my hand and led me on a tour of the new estate, the Malays still in our wake. She showed me the trailer where Hierophile the Sibyl now lived when she wasn't working in town as a tarot card reader and crystal healer. Meg boasted that the former oracle was bringing in enough cash to cover all of Aphalis's expenses. Our dryad friends Joshua and Aloe Vera were pleased to see me. They told me about their work travelling across Southern California, planting new dryads and doing their best to heal the damage from the droughts and wildfires. They had lots of work still to do, but things were looking up. Aloe followed us around for a while, lavering Meg's sunburnt shoulders with goo and chiding her. Finally, we arrived in the house's main room, where Lugaselwa was putting together a rocking chair. She'd been fitted with new mechanical hands. Compliments, Meg told me, of the Hephaestus cabin at Camp Half-Blood. "Hey, cellmate," Lou grinned. She made a hand gesture that was usually not associated with friendly greeting. Then she cursed and shook her metal fingers until they opened into a proper wave. "Sorry about that. These hands haven't quite been programmed right. Got a few kinks to work out." She got up and wrapped me in a bear hug. Her fingers splayed and started tickling me between the shoulder blades, but I decided this must be unintentional, as Lou didn't strike me as the tickle type. "You look well," I said, pulling away. Lou laughed. "I've got my sapling here. I've got a home. I'm a regular old mortal again, and I wouldn't have it any other way." I stopped myself from saying me too. The thought made me melancholy. It would have been inconceivable to the old Apollo. But the idea of aging in this lovely desert treehouse, watching Meg grow into a strong and powerful woman, that didn't sound bad at all. Lou must have picked up on my sadness. She gestured back to the rocking chair. "Well, I'll let you two get on with the tour. Assembling this IKEA furniture is the toughest quest I've had in years." Meg took me out to the terrace as the afternoon sun sank behind the San Jacinto Mountains. My sun chariot would just now be heading towards home, the horses getting excited as they sensed the end of their journey. I would be joining them soon, reuniting with my other self, back at the Palace of the Sun. I looked over at Meg, who was wiping a tear from her eye. "You can't stay, I guess," she said. I took her hand. "Dear Meg." We remained like that in silence for a while, watching the demigods work in the gardens below. "Meg, you've done so much for me, for all of us. I promised to reward you when I became a god again." She started to speak, but I interrupted. "No, wait," I said. "I understand that would cheapen our friendship. I cannot solve mortal problems with a snap of my fingers. I see that you don't want a reward, but you will always be my friend. And if you ever need me, even just to talk, I will be here." Her mouth twitched. "Thanks. That's good, but actually, I would be okay with a unicorn." She had done it again. She could still surprise me. I laughed, snapped my fingers, and a unicorn appeared on the hillside below us, whinnying and scratching the ground with its gold and pearl hooves. She threw her arms around me. "Thanks. You'll still be my friend too, right?" "As long as you'll still be mine," I said. She thought about this. "Yeah, I can do that." I don't recall what else we talked about. The piano lessons I had promised her, different varieties of succulents, the care and feeding of unicorns. I was just happy to be with her. At last, as the sun went down, Meg seemed to understand it was time for me to leave. "You'll come back?" she asked. "Always," I promised. "The sun always comes back." So, dear reader, we have come to the end of my trials. You have followed me through 5 volumes of adventures and 6 months of pain and suffering. By my reckoning, you have read 210 of my haiku. Like Meg, you surely deserve a reward. What would you accept? I'm fresh out of unicorns. However, anytime you take aim and prepare to fire your best shot, anytime you seek to put your emotions into a song or poem, know that I am smiling on you. We are friends now. Call on me. I will be there for you.